Chapter 147. Elder Yan's cave was called Zhujiang Hut. After Zhang Yan stepped in, he found that the spiritual energy was so abundant that it could almost be called a small cave. He thought for a while and smiled. He decided to delay for a few days before leaving. Although as long as he nodded, Elder Yan would be willing to tell him about the for Marquis's water, Xiao Han already knew about that place. In this way, he would definitely come into conflict with Xiao Han, and it would be hard to say who would emerge victorious. Thus, if Elder Yan wanted him to owe him a favor, it was far from enough to just sell information. He needed to take out something more substantial. But this matter could not be said clearly, otherwise it would be disadvantageous. Therefore, he might as well use the excuse of seclusion to ignore it. He believed that with his actions, a shrewd and deep person like Elder Yan would definitely be able to see through his intentions. Moreover, 2 months later, he needed to go to Wudong Agarwood's sect to fulfill his promise and go to the river Styx to search for the demon trove. Today was a good time to take advantage of this opportunity to see if he could increase his strength a little more. After making up his mind, he used the lock stone to close the cave, unfolded the mountain river diagram and went into meditation. In this seclusion, apart from refining the golden fire mystic light, he spent 2 hours nourishing the demon carp Chu Chang's jade token. Now, Zhang Yan could already sense that in at most 2 months, he would be able to completely refine this Xian weapon. However, it was a pity that he had wanted to use this time to comprehend the technique that sect leader Qin had given him. However, while the technique was clearly swimming in his sea of consciousness, every time he tried to take a closer look, it was always a blur. He knew that this was probably because the opportunity had not arrived, but he did not feel depressed about it. He turned his head and threw the matter aside. After meditating like this for a month, he felt that his cultivation had improved. Then he opened the cave door and slowly left. He stepped out of the cave, looked up, and could not help but be surprised. What a heavy rain. After being in seclusion for so many days, heavy rain poured down from the sky like a waterfall that could overturn the sea. The mountain spring actually produced a loud sound like waves crashing into the reef. According to the moisture that seeped into the bones, this rain had been falling for at least 20 days. At this moment, 2 Taoist children came forward. Zhang Yan recognized them. They were the children who stood behind Elder Yan and worshipped him that day. The leading boy was holding an uncovered jade box, within which was a Taoist book. He stepped forward and said in a clear voice, "The Patriarch has ordered us to present this book to you, esteemed guest." Zhang Yan smiled. He did not avoid the 2 children. He picked up the book and flipped through it. After a few glances, he could not help but be engrossed in it. What was recorded in the book was not a mystic technique, but what all the North Star sect's core formation cultivators had achieved in the past thousands of years. What kind of external medicine each of them used, where they got it, what the quality was, and the grade of the pill after the core formation was all recorded in detail. He exhaled softly. This gift could not be said to be light. Elder Yan had finally done what he wanted. To say that Qinsang school was average, it did not lack this, but there had never been a method that was so clearly recorded in words. Master and disciple were all taught orally. As for the Xianmen aristocratic families, the external medicine for the disciples' core formation was found by the family. Other than the direct disciples, the rest were similar. The cultivation of the core formation was also similar. The grade of the pill only depended on the individual's aptitude, and the cultivator did not have to think too much about it. Zhang Yan thought to himself that the North Star sect's Taoist book could only be passed down if the founder of the sect had made it a sect rule. After all, how precious was the experience gained when a cultivator broke through to the next level? If there was not a reason to do it, who would be willing to give it up? Just this alone showed that the North Star sect had great ambitions and great plans. But when he read up to this point, Zhang Yan instead saw through Elder Yan's true intentions. He did not think highly of him alone, but wanted to make friends with the entire Qinsang school. Or to put it another way, he thought highly of the future master and disciple lineage's influence in Qinsang school, which was why he did not hesitate to build a good relationship with Elder Yan. After flipping through about half the book, Zhang Yan put the book away and said to the two boys who were waiting respectfully at the side, "Go back and tell Elder Yan that I agree to what he said. I will complete this matter in 2 years at most." The so-called asking him to bring back Yan Siya and Song Hong was just an excuse, so there was no need to be too impatient. He believed that Elder Yan would have a way to explain things to Linqing Monastery and Bu Pavilion. As for how exactly to do it, it was not for him to worry. Now that this matter was settled, he did not stay any longer. He leapt up, turned into a streak of sword rainbow, and tore through the air. Thanks to his sword aura, his body did not get wet in the slightest, no matter how the rain fell like a waterfall. But after flying for a day, he felt that something was wrong. Everywhere he passed was a boundless lake. There were no farmlands. Gazing into the distance, he saw that the water was rolling in from the north, seemingly endless. He could not help but sigh, and said, "So the long river has burst its banks." This long river came from the North Dark Star continent, traversing the East Flower continent from northwest to southeast, and finally converged into the East Sea. However, the middle section had to pass through the territory of the Pan Luo Palace. The water here would fluctuate between high and low, and it might even burst through the mountains. Thus, successive dynasties had built dams to stop it, but under a true natural disaster, it was not something that could be resisted by human strength. After flying a short distance, his sword light paused slightly. He saw that there was a hill in front of him that was surrounded by water, and there was a Taoist temple on it. Currently, the roof tiles had been blown away by the fierce winds, and there were a dozen men and women inside, shivering and huddled together. There was an old woman holding a baby, screaming at the sky. The scene could not help but be sorrowful. Zhang Yan was silent, and thought to himself, if I had not taken a step into the path of immortality, I would have definitely ended up like them if I had landed here. I could only bitterly pray for the heavens to save me, life and death not in my control. He looked a few more times. If he had not encountered this matter, then it would have been fine, but since he had, he could not just watch them die. He shouted loudly in the air, and a dazzling blue light of over 20 feet shot out from the top of his head, instantly dispersing the rain clouds around him. He bent down and rushed forward, and when he passed by the Taoist temple, he waved his sleeve, and a mass of abundant fog wrapped around the dozen people, lifting them up to the top of the clouds. The dozen people only felt their feet become light, as if they had landed in a warm cotton ball. However, they had not eaten for many days, and coupled with their exhaustion, they did not know what had happened to them, and only thought that they were hallucinating before they died. Other than a young man with clear eyes, the rest were muddle-headed, and their eyes were blank. The young man only felt that his body was as soft as cotton, and he could not help but be amazed. Although he had been starving for many days, he did not know where he got the strength to crawl a few steps forward, and when he looked up, he saw a majestic Taoist in front of him, controlling the wind and the clouds, and he knew that he had been rescued by an immortal, and his heart was moved. Another half a day passed, and the young man did not know how far he had flown. He only felt that the rain around him had gradually lessened, and the hot sun shone so brightly that he almost could not open his eyes. He raised his hand to look, and there seemed to be a majestic city in front of him. At this moment, his body suddenly sank, and he felt that he had landed on the ground again. "This place is densely populated, go find your own livelihood." Zhang Yan stretched out his hand, and dozens of medicinal pills flew out, and each went into the stomachs of the dozen people. These medicinal pills could only dispel the cold, and in the Qinsang school, only the lower house disciples took them when they were training in the mountains, and they were not that rare. However, when used on ordinary people, the medicinal effect was miraculous. Those people immediately felt a warm flow of energy flowing through their meridians, and not only did their fatigue disappear, their mouths began to salivate, and the feeling of hunger and thirst disappeared. Just now, it was as if they had just woken up from a dream, and they all knelt down, and called out, "Immortal." Zhang Yan saw that everything was fine, and turned around to leave. The young man did not know why, but he was anxious, and he mustered up his courage and shouted, "May I ask which immortal from the heavens came down to save us?" Zhang Yan glanced sideways, and saw that the young man was outstanding, and his eyes were clear. Now that his cultivation was profound, he could see some changes in the fate of ordinary people, and this young man was not ordinary at first glance. His heart moved, and he thought to himself, whether it's fate or not, it's all up to you. He raised his hand, and a golden talisman flew out, and in a blink of an eye, it entered the young man's mouth. He then stepped on a rainbow, and a song came down from the clouds. I was originally a mortal spending my life, trapped in a cage without worry, and suddenly I heard a celestial sitting on top of the pavilion, outside of Mount Penglai, at the heaven-seeking pavilion. When the young man heard this song, he was stunned at first, and after a moment, he suddenly had an idea, and his face showed surprise. He took a step forward, knelt on the ground, and respectfully bowed in the direction of Zhang Yan, and said, "Disciple Jiang Zheng, thanks teacher for your guidance." After leaving this group of people, Zhang Yan rode on the Shaoguang, and flew northwest. The Agarwood sect's main altar was located on Mount Wudong, deep in the mountains at the border of the Wei dynasty. Further ahead, it was the territory of the Rouke tribe. This tribe occupied the lush water field in the northwest, and every autumn, they would enter the Wei dynasty's territory to plunder wealth and women. Because of this, the two countries often fought each other. After traveling for another 1,000 miles, the clouds were high, and the sky was blue. On the vast plains, there were several mountain peaks, and on the highest mountain peak, there was a palace with a red roof and golden tiles. Under the scorching sun, it was giving off a colorful glow. At the foot of the mountain, there were many houses, and among them there were some tents. There were even herds of cattle and sheep running on the grassland. There were tens of thousands of people here, and most of them were fleeing from the chaos of war. They made a living by herding. The Agarwood sect had only been established for a few hundred years, and its foundation was shallow. Because of this, most of the disciples were chosen from here. The founder and an elder of the Shaoqing sect were of the same tribe, and because of this remote location, no one came to provoke them. At this moment, the herdsmen living at the foot of the mountain saw the Shaoguang flying in the sky, and they all knelt down and kowtowed, their expressions extremely pious. Chapter 148. From what Zhang Yan saw before, the disciples of the Agarwood sect always had a hint of seductiveness about them. It might have something to do with their techniques, but this woman didn't have any of that. Although she was beautiful, there was a sense of arrogance in her eyes. Looking at her cultivation, the mystic light was so condensed that it was almost solid. She was probably at the peak of the third level of the mystic light realm. At this moment, her hand was on the ribbon at her waist, and she stared at Zhang Yan fiercely. Her face was full of caution, and it seemed like she would start a fight if there was any disagreement. Although she was acting like this, Zhang Yan's expression didn't change. He stepped in the air, and his black robe fluttered in the wind. There was an indescribable sense of carefreeness in his expression. He cupped his hands at the woman and said, "I am Zhang Yan from the Qinsang school. I am here because of fellow Taoist Mu Hongchen's invitation." The woman frowned when she heard this. She sized up Zhang Yan and snorted. "So you are invited by Hongchen? Humph, she has a lot of friends now. She can even invite a top disciple from the Qinsang school." Her words sounded old, as if she had a high status in the Agarwood sect. Zhang Yan looked at her and was about to ask for her identity. At this moment, another ray of light flew over. Mu Hongchen, who hadn't been seen for a long time, appeared in front of them. She bowed to Zhang Yan first, then bowed to the woman from afar. She said, "Hongchen, congratulations on coming out of seclusion, Uncle Master." The woman looked at her and said, "Hongchen, you don't seem happy to see me coming out." Mu Hongchen lowered her head slightly and said softly, "Uncle Master, you must be joking." Although her face was covered by a veil, Zhang Yan could keenly sense the trace of unnaturalness in her tone. The woman flung her sleeves and said expressionlessly, "Fine, since it's an honored guest from Qinsang school, then you'd better treat him well. But this is Agarwood sect's dojo after all. As the eldest senior of this generation, you should clearly explain the taboos of our sect to outsiders." After saying this, she flew into the air and landed in the temple. Zhang Yan smiled playfully and turned to ask, Mu Daoluo, may I know who this fellow Daoist is? Mu Hongqian sighed softly and said, she's my senior uncle, and she's always been proud and arrogant. If her words offended her, please don't take it to heart, fellow Zhang. She waved her sleeves again and said with a smile, I thought fellow Daoist would arrive a few days later. I didn't expect you to arrive so soon. Please follow me. Zhang Yan nodded. Under her guidance, the two of them flew towards the temple that was shining with multicolored light. Along the way, Zhang Yan discovered that not only on this mountain peak, the Agarwood sect also set up a few temples with black tiles and white walls halfway up the mountain. On the mountain wall, there was a rugged mountain path, and he could see many people walking up with difficulty. These places seemed to be specially used for the herdsmen to worship at the foot of the mountain. It wasn't because the disciples of Agarwood sect were weak and couldn't open up a wider path. Instead, they were afraid that the herdsmen would lose their respect for the herdsmen because it was too easy for them to climb up the mountain. They could also use this opportunity to set up various tests and pick out disciples with firm beliefs and suitable for cultivation. Zhang Yan understood that this was because Agarwood sect's foundation was weak. Therefore, they had to start from the heart and play with these tricks when selecting disciples. For a large sect like Qinsang School, there were 9 big cities in the mountain, and each of them had a population comparable to Dei in the mortal world. Moreover, these people were the descendants of the disciples of Qinsang School, so they didn't have to worry about the origin of the disciples. As the two of them flew, Zhang Yan asked in a seemingly unintentional manner, from what I can see, fellow Daoist's martial uncle seems to practice a technique that's very different from yours. Mu Hongqian turned back, rolled up his sleeves, and gave him a thumbs up. You have a good eye, brother Zhang. My senior uncle has the highest aptitude in the sect, and she's also from the ancestral master's Hopu clan. Back then, she received permission from the ancestral master to give up the cultivation method of Agarwood sect and wandered outside for more than 30 years before she found a secret manual to cultivate. 3 years ago, she accepted my junior sister Pan as her disciple, and then she went into closed-door cultivation. I didn't expect my senior uncle to come out of closed-door cultivation when you came today. Zhang Yan was shocked. How could there be such a coincidence? Although they only met in a hurry, he could see the rejection in the girl's eyes. However, he only came to get the bright stone. As for fulfilling the promise, he didn't care what the people of Agarwood sect thought about it. When they arrived in front of the temple, the two landed on the cloud. Mu Hongqian welcomed Zhang Yan into the hall, and just as they sat down, a maidservant came up and said, Senior sister, senior uncle Ni wants to see you. He said he has something to discuss with you. Mu Hongqian said unhappily, Senior uncle Ni saw me entertaining brother Zhang just now, why did he ask you to come? Go and report that I'll go later. When the maidservant heard this, she stood there and didn't leave. Mu Hongqian was furious, and just when she was about to scold her, Zhang Yan smiled and said, I originally agreed to meet you 2 months later, but I'm already here. Since you have something to attend to in the sect, why don't you go first? Mu Hongqian hesitated for a while and nodded. Then I'll be neglecting senior brother Zhang. Zhang Yan smiled and waved his hand to show that he didn't mind. Mu Hongqian excused herself and left the hall on a carefree light. After a while, she arrived at a side hall that was filled with flowers and grass. After she was informed by the maidservant at the door, she walked on the scarlet carpet and came to an inner room. She saw a figure lying on her side behind a gauze curtain, and she said, Hongqian greets senior uncle Ni. Her senior uncle's name was Ni Qianying, and she was lying on a couch at the moment. When she saw Mu Hongqian coming in, she blew a fragrant wind and opened the gauze curtain on the door. She then sat up and nodded at Mu Hongqian. She waved her hand in an imposing manner and said, You don't have to be so polite, take a seat. However, Mu Hongqian didn't sit down. The tall lady stood there and said directly, Senior uncle, why did you summon me? Ni Qianying glanced at her and said, You're going to be the sect leader in the future, so you need to change your temper. She pondered for a while and said, Since you've asked, I'll tell you about it. When I came out of seclusion this time, I felt that the opportunity to condense my core had arrived. Hongchen, I remember that when senior sister passed away, she left you quite a lot of clear stones. Why don't you lend them to me first, and it won't be too late to return them to you after I've condensed my core. What do you think? This. Mu Hongchen's body trembled slightly. Not to mention whether this senior uncle could really condense her core, even if she was 100% confident, she had already promised to give it to Zhang Yan. It was impossible for her to return it. However, only a few people knew about this matter, so why did this senior uncle know about it? She took a deep breath and said in a low voice, reporting to senior uncle, I've already promised to give this to fellow Zhang, so I can't give it to you anymore. Ni Qianying stared straight at her. After a while, she said coldly, why? Mu Hongchen said, Senior uncle, you should know that before my master passed away, he instructed me to take down the demonic treasure in the depths of the river Styx, so that it can be the foundation of our sect in the future. However, if I want to find that place of extreme Yin, I must have the Ganoderma fruit. However, this item is with fellow Zhang now. He's a disciple of Qinsang school, and there are very few things in our sect that can move him. This clear stone is the only thing that can move him. Ridiculous. Ni Qianying's eyes widened and she scolded, this item was painstakingly found by my sect leader junior sister for you to condense your core. Even if you want to use it, you have to give it to the disciples of our sect. How can you give it to an outsider? Although the Ganoderma fruit is rare, it's not impossible to find it if you spend some effort to find it. Hongchen, this is inappropriate. Mu Hongchen said loudly, Senior uncle, you're wrong. Since it was given to me by my master, it belongs to me. Now that the opportunity to open the demonic treasure is right in front of us, why do we have to go through all the trouble? Ni Qianying frowned slightly. She knew this junior nephew's temper very well, and she knew that she couldn't go against him. She softened her tone and said, how about this? I have a superior Xian technique here that can also lead to the Great Tao. I'll teach this technique to you, and then we can slowly search for the Ganoderma fruit. This way, we won't waste any time. You can treat this fellow from Qinsang school well for a few days, and then ask him to go back with kind words. Mu Hongchen sneered in his heart. Even if this uncle master's cultivation technique is really top-notch, he might not teach it to me sincerely. Moreover, wouldn't all the disciples in the sect have to look up to this uncle master? Therefore, she couldn't agree to it. As she thought of this, she said resolutely, Senior uncle, please forgive me. I can't agree to this. Ni Qianying's eyes swept over her coldly and she said, what? You're disregarding the words of this senior uncle. Mu Hongchen curtsied and said, I don't dare to, but senior uncle, don't forget that master said before she passed away that I'll take over the Agarwood sect, and I'll decide what to do. You. Ni Qianying's expression stiffened. After her junior sister passed away, she left the position of sect leader to Mu Hongchen. This was the reason why she was so angry that she went into closed-door cultivation. She snorted and said, don't forget that before she left, junior sister also said that if you can't reach the core transformation state in 30 years, she'll have to give up the position of sect leader to someone else. You don't have to worry about that, senior uncle. If there's nothing else, I still have to entertain an important guest. I'll take my leave first. Mu Hongchen didn't care about Ni Qianying's hateful gaze as she turned around and left. Not long after she left, a pink figure floated in. It was a beautiful girl who was about 17 or 18 years old. She said to Ni Qianying, Senior uncle, you're letting her go just like that? Ni Qianying gritted her teeth and said, currently, junior sister only told her about the path to the river Styx, so I can't force her too much. It won't be too late for me to deal with her after she finds the demon treasury. Chapter 149. Zhang Yan sat cross-legged on a lonely cliff. In front of him floated a Dharma treasure that emitted a green glow. He spat out streams of spiritual qi from his mouth and nose, which wrapped around the treasure as it floated in the air. From time to time, he would make hand seals, but his movements were getting faster and faster. There was even a rumbling sound. It was obvious that he had reached a critical moment in refining a certain Dharma treasure. Mu Hongchen sat on a rock not far away. Behind her sat a girl who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. She rested her chin on her hands and looked at Zhang Yan curiously. Her forearm was exposed, and there were dozens of intricate silver rings on it. She wore a pair of fox-skin boots. Although her skin was slightly tanned, she looked very cute. Footsteps could be heard. A girl in a purple dress and holding a jade flute walked over. She looked up and complained, "Eldest senior sister, how much longer do we have to wait for that fellow Zhang? Are we still going to look for the devil's treasury?" As early as 3 days ago, they had already arrived here. However, when Zhang Yan came to fulfill his promise, he suddenly felt that the jade pendant that he had refined daily was vibrating gently. That strand of true consciousness actually took the initiative to call out to him. He immediately knew that the time to completely refine this treasure had arrived. If he missed this opportunity, who knew when he would have to wait for another long time. Therefore, he did not delay any further. He only greeted Mu Hongchen and chose a place to sit down and refine. The 3 disciples of the Agarwood sect could not leave because of their pride. It was as if they were his guards. No wonder the girl in purple was unhappy. Unexpectedly, Mu Hongchen, who was usually impatient, did not respond to her complaints. Instead, she comforted her. "We have already waited for 3 days. Are you afraid of waiting for a few more days? Even junior sister who can endure it. Why are you so anxious, junior sister Qi?" The girl in purple pouted but did not dare to say anything else. After another 2 hours, Mu Hongchen suddenly heard a clear whistle. She could not help but look over. Zhang Yan's expression was solemn. His hands moved non-stop as he continuously sent out dozens of spells. The magic treasure hovering in front of him spun faster and faster. In the end, the jade token shook and turned into a white light that flew into his forehead. Zhang Yan laughed heartily when he sensed the admiration from the jade token. He stood up in high spirits and floated down from the cliff. He cupped his hands towards Mu Hongchen and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting, brother Mu." Mu Hongchen hurriedly returned the greeting and said, "Not at all. Congratulations on obtaining a Dharma treasure. May I know the origin of this treasure?" Zhang Yan smiled and said nothing. Mu Hongchen knew that Zhang Yan didn't want to expose her, so she didn't ask anymore. She shouted, "Junior sisters, why aren't you coming over to greet fellow Taoist Zhang? Qi Yalan greets you, fellow Taoist Zhang." Her expression was cold, and it was obvious that she still had a knot in her heart about Zhang Yan making them wait for a few more days. "Aya, we can go now." The dark-skinned girl leaped down from the rock and came forward to greet him, but her movements were awkward. In the end, she giggled and ran away. Mu Hongchen shook her head helplessly and said, "Junior sister Hu Ju is from the Rook clan and doesn't practice etiquette. Please don't blame her, fellow Taoist Zhang." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Thank you for waiting for so many days. I should be the one saying that." Mu Hongchen chuckled under her veil. She turned her body and pointed at a gap in the mountain wall in front of her. She said, "Look, fellow Taoist. This is the entrance to the Styx." Zhang Yan turned his head and saw that the gap was shaped like a weird mouth. Filthy and thick black water could be seen seeping out from it. It looked like a bleeding wound and emitted a sorrowful and inexplicable aura. He knew that what Mu Hongchen said was true. Mu Hongchen hesitated for a while and walked 2 steps towards Zhang Yan. She handed over a small bottle in her hand and said softly, "This is what I can give you." Zhang Yan took it calmly and opened it in front of Mu Hongchen. He sniffed it carefully and confirmed that it was a bright stone. After confirming that there was no mistake, he waved his hand and kept it. Then, he nodded at her. Mu Hongchen made up her mind and said, "This Styx is hidden deep in the earth veins, and there is a lot of dark and gloomy aura coming from it. This aura is divided into 9 levels, and each level is more powerful than the one before. Master has been there many times when he was alive, and he concluded that the Styx Devil Trove should be between the 5th and 6th level. Although Master has already explored the first 4 levels, we will need the help of the Ganoderma fruit if we want to go deeper. Zhang Yan smiled and replied, "Of course." Mu Hongchen heaved a sigh of relief and called out, "Zhang Yan and my 2 junior sisters, please follow me." She took a few steps forward, stood up and leaped, turning into a red ray and darted into the mountain crevice. The dark and gloomy air was murky and it was buried deep in the mountain wall, a place where there was no daylight. Not to mention the complexity of the path, even a cultivator's vision could only see within 7 to 8 feet. Naturally, they could not fall too far behind, it was very easy to get lost. Therefore, Zhang Yan and the 2 young girls followed swiftly on their flying lights. The dark and gloomy aura was formed by the various impurities that were forced out from the Styx. The first level was the Li Chen's filthy aura. If an ordinary person breathed in it, their limbs would become numb and they would faint on the spot. However, it was nothing to cultivators. Mu Hongchen had been to this place more than 20 times, so she was familiar with the path. She turned left and right in the mountain crack, and they traveled more than 10 miles in a flash. The 3 people behind her followed closely behind, and they did not fall behind at all. After passing through another bend, the road ahead suddenly widened. They had already reached the 2nd level. This level of gloomy aura was called the Een Turbid Aura. Although it was stronger than the first level of gloomy aura, the 4 of them ignored it, and they passed through it easily in less than an hour. However, from the 3rd level onwards, it was not so simple. This level was called the Gully Filthy Aura. If one stayed here for too long, even a cultivator would feel short of breath, and the spiritual energy around their body would not circulate smoothly. There were many paths here, and it was not easy to find the entrance to the next level. Although Mu Hongchen was like an old horse that knew the way, and her speed was getting faster and faster, it was because she had spent a few years to find the way. If someone came here for the first time without a guide, they would definitely not be able to reach this level in one go. They walked very quickly on this level, and they arrived at the 4th level in less than a moment. The gloomy aura here was called the Rootless Filthy Aura. If an ordinary cultivator breathed in a little bit of it, they would feel dizzy, and their limbs would become numb. The spiritual energy in their body would slowly leak out, and they would die here if they were not careful. Therefore, when they arrived at this level, they were not as relaxed as before. They all released their mystic light to protect themselves, and the difference between them could be seen now. The red glow on Mu Hongchen's body was blazing, and he was like a rising sun that opened the path in front of him. The gloomy aura dissipated when it was swept away. Qi Yelan's mystic light was like a faint purple flower, and when it was released, a strange fragrance assailed their noses. She carefully forced the gloomy aura away, and did not want to let a single bit of it in. Hu Ju's mystic light was like countless long whips, and the gloomy aura was stirred up in all directions. Although it seemed to be very powerful, her cultivation was far from the 2 senior sisters in front of her. Qi Yelan looked at Mu Hongchen, who passed through the ravines and streams in front of her, and could not help but feel envious. She thought to herself, big senior sister's cultivation is getting better and better. It's a pity that this Agarwood mystic art can only be cultivated by the sect leader's eldest disciple. However, after obtaining the Devil's Trove, I'm sure I'll be able to learn an even better technique. She secretly turned around to look at Zhang Yan, and saw that he was wrapped in a blue gloomy cloud. Although he looked relaxed, he was too inconspicuous compared to the dazzling and fragrant mystic light on their bodies. She thought to herself, I was wondering what's so different about Qinsang School, but it turns out that it's just so. At this moment, Mu Hongchen said in a deep voice, the 5th level, the Death Aura, is in front of us. Everyone, be careful. Qi Yelan's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly gathered her thoughts and circulated the mystic light on her body with all her might. The Death Aura was not like the gloomy aura of the first 4 levels. This aura could block the 7 orifices and block the yin and yang energy. Once one was tainted by it, one would be like maggots in one's bones, unable to see, hear, or smell anything. If a cultivator with clear energy were to come here, he would die in an instant if he did not have any treasures to protect himself. Mu Hongchen, who was in front of them, shouted and shook off some of the death aura. She raised her wrist and took out a delicate and unique oil lamp. As soon as the lamp appeared, it dispelled a lot of the death aura that was like black silk. The yin haze within 100 feet was gone, and the walls could be seen clearly. Mu Hongchen waved the lamp, and a circle of colorful light was released. This lamp is called the Heart Protection Lamp. It was refined by my teacher when he was still alive. It can break through the darkness and is not afraid of evil. The lamp oil can burn for 3 days and 3 nights, so you can speak without worry. However, there are many yin demons on the 5th level. Fellow Taoist Zhang, my 2 junior sisters, you must be careful. Zhang Yan smiled and waved his sleeves. He threw a bottle of elixir to each of the 3 women and said, "This is the calming elixir, it can help you to resist the demons." Mu Hongchen took the bottle of elixir. She did not understand what it was for at first, but after hearing it, she could not help but be overjoyed. She immediately cupped her hands like a man and said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist Zhang." She thought to herself, "I've really invited the right person this time." This calming elixir can be used to resist the demons in one's heart. With this item in hand, I don't need to worry about anything else. Even if there are demons blocking the way, I can still unleash my full strength. This calming elixir is really rare. With this elixir, I won't have to worry about going berserk during cultivation. Ordinary cultivators would not even be willing to take one out. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Zhang to give me 3 bottles. He's indeed a disciple of a big sect. These bottles of calming elixir were not specially prepared by Zhang Yan. They were leftovers from his previous trip to the demon sect. To him, a mere demon was not worth his attention. If it was a more powerful demon, these calming elixir would not be of much use. Hence, he took it out as a favor. At this point, Mu Hongchen did not continue forward. Instead, she took out the heart protection lamp and shone it around, as if she was looking for something. Not long after, she pointed at a mark on the wall and said, "This is the place. Previously, I saw the devil treasury floating in the spirit chi here." She turned around and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, please release the Ganoderma horse and search for the location of the devil treasury." At the same time, at the entrance of the river Styx, 2 figures flashed over. They were Ni Qianying and the girl in pink. Ni Qianying looked down and said solemnly, "Jiao Jiao, you stay here and stand guard. I need to go down. If I can snatch the devil's treasury before that last Hongchen, it will be a success." The girl in pink was a little worried and said, "Uncle Master, after you leave, there will be no one guarding the Agarwood Hall. What if a powerful enemy attacks?" Ni Qianying snorted and said, "The Agarwood Hall has been peaceful for 100 years. Who would be interested in such a desolate place? Besides, how can that little family business compare to the ancient demon treasury? After I seize the devil's treasury, if that lass, Hong Chen, is willing to obediently hand over the position of substitute sect leader, then I'll let her go. If she refuses, then I'll kill her here." Chapter 150. Zhang Yan took out the Ganoderma fruit from his sleeve. As soon as he took out this plump white fruit, the bud split into 4 sides, and a white horse the size of a baby's palm jumped out. It opened its curious and lively eyes and looked around. This Ganoderma horse was born from the Ganoderma that was nourished by the earth chi. It had been thousands of years since it took form. Its skin was snow-white and tender, and there were clouds and mist swirling around its 4 legs. It seemed to be very happy with the yin chi here. It let out a bird-like chirp and ran around Zhang Yan excitedly before disappearing in the blink of an eye. Zhang Yan's expression was calm. He wasn't afraid that the Ganoderma horse would get lost. With the Ganoderma bud in hand, this Ganoderma horse could only return obediently no matter where it went. As expected, not long after, the Ganoderma horse turned around again and rubbed itself against Zhang Yan's feet intimately. Mu Hongchen said in surprise, I didn't expect this Ganoderma horse to be so tamed, fellow Taoist Zhang. Ganoderma horses were different from ordinary spiritual beings. Apart from absorbing all kinds of yin qi to survive, its owner also needed to feed it with blood essence every month. After a long time, it would never leave its side, and it could be controlled at will. The reason why Mu Hongqian agreed to a 2-month period with Zhang Yan was because she thought that Zhang Yan would need at least 2 months to barely tame this Ganoderma horse. In her imagination, the time was very short, but she didn't expect this Ganoderma horse to be so obedient. Zhang Yan smiled softly and said, I was just lucky. Only he knew that the reason why this Ganoderma horse was so obedient was because it ate a shell pearl every day. This shell pearl was formed from the essence of spirit shells, and it was the most nourishing spiritual beings like the Ganoderma horse. Now that it was addicted to eating it, it couldn't leave it even for a day. How could it not be obedient to Zhang Yan? One had to know. Even the 5-colored spirit lizard that cleaned the cave abodes on the Spirit Page Island only lived on insects, and it only ate spirit beads once every few months. Only cultivators like Zhang Yan, who could easily take out tens of thousands of spirit beads, could afford to use such a method of cultivation. Zhang Yan reached out a finger and stroked the little nose of the Zhi horse. With a thought, the psychic Ganoderma horse immediately understood what he meant. It neighed twice, and its 4 hooves stepped on a trail of white smoke, heading towards the depths of the 5th layer. He smiled at Mu Hongqian and said, Fellow Taoist, I've already ordered the Ganoderma horse to search for the demonic treasure. We'll just wait here. He and the Ganoderma horse were connected by heart and blood, so as soon as he discovered something, he would be able to rush over immediately. When they reached the 5th layer of nether energy, they were already extremely close to the netherworld river below. The weaker mystic light realm cultivators wouldn't be able to hold on for long. If it wasn't for the heart-protecting lamp, apart from Zhang Yan and Mu Hongqian, the other 2 female disciples of the Agarwood cult probably wouldn't be able to hold on for long. The 6th layer, grievance-evoking, was even more powerful. Just a little bit of it would be able to corrode one's flesh and bones, and damage one's internal organs. It was as if a mystic light realm cultivator had a protective artifact. If they didn't stay for long, they could still go. When they reached the 7th layer, grievance-evoking, it wasn't a place that a mystic light realm cultivator could enter. Mu Hongqian's expression under the veil was also a bit nervous. The demonic treasure was wandering with the 9 energies of the netherworld river. Although she had determined that it would spend most of its time wandering around the 5th or 6th layer, if it entered the 7th layer, then there would be nothing she could do. She could only wait until the demonic treasure returned to the 6th layer. The 4 of them waited patiently on the 5th layer, but they didn't expect that the Ganoderma horse would be gone for an entire day. Qi Yelan was the first one who couldn't take it anymore. However, this place was completely silent, and they couldn't even see the sun or the moon. Furthermore, he couldn't even go outside the light of the heart protection lamp, so he couldn't help but ask, Fellow Taoist Zhang, that Ganoderma horse of yours wouldn't have run away, would it? Zhang Yan smiled and was about to answer, but his expression suddenly changed, and he said, I found it. Mu Hongqian became spirited and couldn't help but ask, where is it? Zhang Yan used his mental energy to check. After communicating with the Ganoderma horse, he said, the demonic treasure is currently on the 6th layer. According to the direction it is wandering in, we will have to wait for it to reach the 5th layer. We will probably have to wait for another 2 days, but if we rush over now, it will take about a day and a half. It'll take about a day and a half. I'll leave the decision to you, fellow Taoist Red Dust. Mu Hongqian calculated for a while. Logically speaking, waiting for the demonic treasure to drift to the 5th layer was the safest, but who could guarantee that it would be like that? She had been in the 9 Qis of the Styx many times, and she knew that there was not only the darkening nether Qi, but also the earth fiend Yin wind. When the Yin wind blew, it would carry a trace of the water of the Styx river. Even her master, the former sect master of the Agarwood sect, had underestimated the Yin wind and had his golden core contaminated by the water of the Styx river. This caused his body, which was already at the end of its life, to lose the last of his lifespan. Not long after he returned, he passed away in a seated posture in the hall. Mu Hongqin knew very well that if she couldn't get hold of something that was close to her, it would never belong to her. Therefore, she said decisively, "My heart protection lamp only has 2 days' worth of lamp oil left. Daoist Zhang, junior sisters, if we are quick, we can rush over in time and retrieve the demonic treasure. We can still make it back in time." Hearing this, Qi Yelan's face couldn't help but turn pale. Once they reached the 6th layer, her life would completely depend on the heart protection lamp. If she encountered any accidents, she wouldn't even have the chance to escape. She forced a smile and said, "Eldest senior sister, my cultivation is not good enough. Why don't you let me stay here and help you?" Mu Hongqin seemed to have seen through her fear, but she didn't blame her. She sighed softly and said, "Junior sister Qi, I've been here more than 20 times, and there were 7 times that I came here. Every time, I was defeated by a powerful demon. This demon is extremely powerful, and its cultivation is almost at the mystic light realm. We can only be safe if we are together. You are left here alone. If you encounter this demon, how are you going to deal with it?" Qi Yelan hesitated for a while, but she finally nodded. Mu Hongqin grabbed her hand and patted it, signaling her to be at ease. In comparison, Hu Ju's thoughts were simple, and she didn't think so much. She only listened as if she understood, and in her heart, she felt that it was right to follow eldest senior sister. Zhang Yan naturally didn't mind. Not to mention that he had magic treasures to protect himself, the dense and long blue cloud mystic light on his body was enough for him to spend a few months here. However, he was also curious in his heart. If he only relied on the mystic light to protect himself, which layer of the 9 Qis could he go down to? But just as he was about to move, the sword ball in between his eyebrows twitched slightly. This was a warning sign. His eyes flashed, and he said, "Be careful, fellow Taoists." Mu Hongqin and the other 2 hurriedly stood back to back and got into a defensive posture. But after waiting for a while, they didn't see any movement. Qi Yelan frowned slightly and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang." Just as she opened her mouth, a cold spear silently extended from the top, piercing towards her head. However, at the moment when it touched her, it seemed to have hit a barrier. A ball of red light bloomed on the tip of the spear, and it actually blocked the spear by a hair's breadth. Mu Hongqin only felt the veil on her face shake, and she couldn't help but be shocked. She shouted, "It's above, junior sisters, be careful." At this moment, she was also afraid. Fortunately, her mask was the Agarwood sect's treasure, the Red Cloud's Agarwood shield, which protected all 3 of them. Otherwise, the spear just now might have killed Qi Yelan, who was distracted. The spear retracted backwards, and the surrounding black gas seemed to be stirred by a big hand. Slowly, a 20 feet tall demon wearing a helmet and armor walked out of it. His face was blurred, but his exposed fingers were like old tree roots, and when he stepped forward, the armor on his body collided repeatedly, making the sound of metal clashing. Hu Ju let out a shout and formed a seal with her hand. More than a dozen silver rings flew out from her arm and hit the devil like a torrential rain. When they collided with the armor, there was a clanging sound. Although the devil was forced back step by step, it didn't suffer much damage. In the end, a muffled roar came from inside the helmet, and the spear in its hand swung out like a wheel of spear shadows, actually picking up the silver rings that were flying at it one by one. Hu Ju hurriedly waved her hand and took back the silver rings. She clearly heard a trace of an imperceptible cracking sound. When she took a closer look, there were indeed at least 5 silver rings that had cracks on them. The originally overflowing spiritual qi was now dim and dull. Although she could refine and repair them when she took them back, she couldn't help but feel her eyes redden. Mu Hongqin's eyes were solemn, and she said in a low voice, "Be careful, this demon has a divine weapon in his hand." Qi Yelan was almost killed just now. She was shocked and angry. She took out a handful of colorful petals and scattered them at the devil. These petals were not magic treasures, but magic weapons that she usually refined with spirit water. This was a secret skill of the Agarwood sect, and if she really mastered it, its power would be considerable. But for the sake of looking good, she picked and chose 7 colors. Although it was dazzling, its power was more than 30% weaker than the original. Seeing the petals coming over, the demon laughed strangely and blew out a breath of air. The petals withered in the air and scattered into ashes. Then he took a big step and actually crossed a few feet in an instant, arriving in front of Qi Yelan. As if he had locked onto her, he raised the tip of his spear and stabbed it towards her chest. However, halfway through the spear, the demon seemed to have sensed something. With a roar, he turned the spear around as if to block something, but before he could raise it, a sword ray flashed past his neck. The body of the demon stiffened, and then he fell with a loud bang. The spear in his hand fell out of his hand, and wisps of smoke scattered from his armor. Not long after, it became an empty shell of armor. At the same time, under the 7th level of the dark and gloomy aura, a strange fairy was drifting aimlessly. Inside the fairy sat a middle-aged Taoist who looked to be in his 40s, with thick lips and shoulder-length earlobes. His eyes were originally closed, and there was no breath at all, as if he was dead. But at the moment when the demon was killed, he suddenly opened his eyes and took out a bronze mirror. After looking at it for a while, he put it down and slowly stroked his beard. He smiled and said, "After waiting for a long time, another fish has taken the bait." Good, the 3 women are not difficult to deal with, but that young Taoist is actually a sword cultivator. Could it be Brother Shaoqing? Why don't I try again? He reached into his sleeve and took out a row of tokens. The tokens were divided into 3 colors, gold, silver, and bronze, and each color had 7 tokens. He took a look and chanted a spell. In an instant, 3 silver tokens flew through the air. Chapter 151. Qi Yelan's face was pale. She raised her hand to protect her chest and gasped for air. The spear was as fast as lightning. If it wasn't for Zhang Yan's timely rescue, she would have been pierced by the spear. Seeing that she was out of danger, Mu Hongqian, who was about to make a move, secretly heaved a sigh of relief and glanced at Zhang Yan with gratitude. Qi Yelan had been cultivating in the sect for a long time and was one of the top disciples in her generation. She was one of the only 3 disciples in the mystic light realm, so it was inevitable that she was a little arrogant. Seeing that Zhang Yan was only in the mystic light realm, she thought that she wasn't much weaker than him. That was why she didn't seem to be very respectful to Zhang Yan earlier. But how would she know that even if they were in the same realm, there was a world of difference between their cultivation and the disciples of the big sects? Seeing that she was still in shock, Mu Hongqian couldn't help but shake his head. He came in front of Zhang Yan and bowed. On behalf of junior sister Qi, I thank you, fellow Zhang, for your help. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. You don't have to be so polite. It's nothing. He took 2 steps forward and looked at the armor under his feet. This demon is wearing armor. It's definitely not something that can be produced in the Netherworld River. Mu Hongqian also moved to his side, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. He said, my master once said that this demonic treasure had been floating in the Netherworld River for many years. As a result, the restrictions on it collapsed, and the door was opened, causing the secret manual to leak out. That's how our sect obtained it. This demon's armor might have been obtained from the demonic treasure as well. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. That makes sense. But I'm afraid there's more than one demon. I'll lead the way. Be careful, fellow Mu. Mu Hongqian knew that it wasn't the time to be polite. Then, I'll have to trouble you, fellow Zhang. Seeing that Zhang Yan did not seem to care about the armor and the divine armament at all, she hesitated for a moment before extending her hand and keeping the 2 items. Zhang Yan saw that Mo Tiange was holding the heart-protecting lantern earlier, so she was a little slower in dealing with the enemy. He muttered to himself for a moment, then waved his sleeve and 3 talismans flew out. He said, fellow Taoists, if you're careless and get out of the lantern's illumination, these talismans can protect you for a moment. Mu Hongqian raised his hand and took it. When the talisman was in his hand, he felt as if he was holding a warm stove. The coldness in his body disappeared and he was shocked. He thought to himself, this fellow Taoist Zhang actually knows the talisman technique. I heard that if this technique is taught properly, it can also lead to the great Tao. She couldn't help but feel envious. Even though the Agarwood sect also had 7 or 8 kinds of techniques, only her Agarwood mysterious technique could be practiced to transforming Dan realm. Compared to the mysterious techniques of the big sects, it naturally paled in comparison. The Ganoderma horse had already scouted out the path ahead. Zhang Yan rode on his sword light and relied on the feeling in his heart to rush straight towards the entrance of the 6th floor. Mu Hongchen hurriedly caught up with him and moved away from him. He raised the heart protection lamp in his hand high up, and a gentle light shone down, illuminating the path ahead. They didn't encounter any obstacles along the way. However, she was very nervous and didn't dare to relax. No one knew how deep this underground ravine was. After flying for a day, Mu Hongchen was still fine, but Qi Yelan and Hu Ju behind her were exhausted. Their mystic lights were dim, and it was obvious that they had no energy to continue. At this moment, Zhang Yan shouted calmly, "The dark Qi of the 6th floor is in front of us. Be careful, fellow Taoists." When Mu Hongchen heard this, she quickly gathered herself and raised the heart protection lamp in her hand high up. However, even though she was prepared, she only flew for a few feet when she felt a pressure coming from all directions. The flame of the heart protection lamp suddenly swayed, as if it was going to be extinguished. The original range of light instantly shrunk. She quickly stood still and could not help but be shocked. Only then did she know how powerful the 6th level's grievous aura was. It was far from comparable to the spirit Qi on the 6th level. Qi Yelan was at the back of the group. Without the protection of the heart protection lamp, she let out a cry of surprise. At this moment, the talisman on her body spontaneously combusted, forcing the nether Qi away. With this gap, she hurriedly took a few steps forward and rushed back into the light. Only then did she calm down. When she calmed down, she saw that Zhang Yan had stopped and was looking back. She quickly bowed but didn't dare to look at him. She lowered her head and said, "It's all thanks to senior brother Zhang's talisman." Otherwise, Zhang Yan glanced at her and smiled faintly. "It's nothing. Junior sister Qi, you don't have to be so polite." Qi Yelan saw that the talisman was indeed used for protection and wanted to borrow another one. But when she saw that Zhang Yan was indifferent to her, she felt annoyed. She thought to herself, "You're just a disciple of a big sect and that's why you're able to learn such superior skills. Once you learn the secret manual of the Devil's Treasury, you might not be weaker than you." Mu Hongchen was also frightened. She calmed herself down and activated her Xian Qi to open the light of the heart-protecting lamp again. She said with a little worry, "I didn't expect that the grievance evoking is so powerful. It's only been a day and the lamp has already used up half of its oil. I wonder how much further we have to go." Zhang Yan calculated in his heart and smiled. "We're in luck. The Devil's Treasury is floating in this direction. If we go now, we'll be able to reach it in less than 2 hours." Mu Hongchen was overjoyed and said, "If that's the case, we shouldn't delay any longer." Zhang Yan nodded. With a wave of sword light, he broke through the layers of dark Qi and flew away again. When Qi Yelan and Hu Ju heard this, they forced themselves to be alert and tried their best to catch up. After an hour, Zhang Yan saw a white light flying towards him. He knew that it was the Ganoderma horse. He let it fall into the Ganoderma bud and kept it in his sleeve. At this moment, Mu Hongchen, who was beside him, exclaimed softly. Her voice was filled with unconcealable joy. A squarish flying pavilion that was about 100 feet tall slowly floated towards them. This pavilion was completely black and there were many carvings of unknown beasts on the roof. They looked ferocious as if they were alive. Although they had been here for many years, they still emitted a bloodthirsty aura. This pavilion had a total of 6 floors. There were doors but no windows. When it floated in the dark Qi, it seemed extremely lonely. Mu Hongchen could clearly see that the entrance of this flying pavilion was wide open. It was not guarded at all. She could even see the books and golden weapons on the wooden shelves. In the middle of the first floor, there was a black stone tablet with talisman characters on it. It was obvious that it was the core of this devil's treasury. As long as she controlled this tablet, the devil's treasury would fall into her hands. Seeing that the devil's treasury was so close to her, her heart was moved. She was still thinking about how to break the devil's treasury, but she didn't expect it to be so easy and within her reach. In her excitement, she leaped towards the door. But before she reached the pavilion, her expression changed. A silver light flashed and a long spear pierced out from the door. A red light immediately rose from her mask and blocked in front of her. However, this attack was so powerful that it caused the light to tremble and the red light to overflow in all directions. Her body shook and she hurriedly took a few steps back. She looked up in shock. A cultivator with a stiff expression walked out from the door. He was naked and his hair was disheveled. There was a faint silver light on his skin, but it was a little uncertain. He held a long spear with a ghost head in his hand and walked out step by step. However, when he reached the edge of the flying pavilion, he stopped moving. Mu Hongchen retreated to the side of Zhang Yan and frowned under her veil. She said in a low voice, "Fellow Zhang, this demon has already reached the realm of turning illusory into something real. It must be a devil manifestation. Could it be a sure guard left behind by the owner of the devil's treasury?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said with a smile, "Not necessarily. Maybe this demon saw a suitable place for cultivation and decided to occupy it." Mu Hongchen was stunned. He thought about it carefully and nodded his head in agreement. "Now that I've heard what you said, it's possible. You have a high cultivation, why don't you wait for us to hold the line? I'll bring my 2 junior sisters to test him." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Sure." Mu Hongchen took a deep breath and finally muttered something. She raised her arm and raised the heart protection lamp into the air. In an instant, the lamp fire rose and the light expanded, illuminating everything within 30 feet. She shouted, "Junior sisters, follow me and attack this demon." As soon as she finished speaking, she was the first to rush forward. A red light rose from the top of her head and danced wildly like fire. It spun in the air and swept towards the demon. A green light flashed across the demon's eyes, but he stood there without moving. He gathered a ball of black gas in his palm and waited for the red light to come close before he slapped it on the mystic light. Mu Hongchen only felt that the mystic light was about to dissipate. He tried his best to stabilize himself and tried to compete with the demon. However, he didn't expect that he couldn't withstand the force at all. His body swayed continuously and finally, he felt a tightness in his chest. He had no choice but to retreat. At this time, Qi Yelan also rushed up. Above her head was a mysterious light that looked like a flower. At this time, she saw an opening and was about to fall down. But the devil did not even look at it and swept horizontally. Suddenly, a whistling sound broke through the air, bringing with it a gust of wind. Qi Yelan rarely fought with others. She was able to dodge it with her calm mind. However, when she saw the demon's ferocious momentum, she instantly panicked and didn't know what to do. In the end, she barely tilted her body. With a bang, the spear hit her shoulder. Even with the protection of the light, her shoulder was still shattered and she couldn't help but cry out in pain as she fell out. Hu Ju stood in the distance. She took off the silver ring from her arm and threw it towards the demon. The demon swung the spear in his hand and the shadows of the spear shook continuously. In the midst of a series of clanging sounds, the silver ring was pushed away. In the end, a ray of silver light shot towards her face. Hu Ju didn't expect the demon to have such a move and couldn't help but exclaim. Zhang Yan stood not far away. When he saw this, a ray of sword light flew out from his forehead and slashed towards the silver light. After a sound of metal clashing, the silver light fell to the ground. Qi Yelan fell to the ground and was enduring the pain to take out some healing elixirs. However, something fell in front of her. She took a look and found that it was a dazzling silver plate. She knew that it was the celestial artifact that the demon had just thrown out. She couldn't help but think to herself, senior sister took the armor and the divine weapon. I don't have a suitable celestial artifact now. This thing looks like a low-grade spiritual artifact, but the demon didn't know what it was. Chapter 152. Qi Yelan's face was pale. She raised her hand to protect her chest and gasped for air. The spear was as fast as lightning. If it wasn't for Zhang Yan's timely rescue, she would have been pierced by the spear. Seeing that she was out of danger, Mu Hongqian, who was about to make a move, heaved a sigh of relief and glanced at Zhang Yan with gratitude. Qi Yelan had been cultivating in the sect for a long time, and she was one of the top disciples in her generation. She was one of the only 3 disciples in the mystic light realm, so it was inevitable that she was a little arrogant. Seeing that Zhang Yan was only at the mystic light realm, she thought that she wasn't much weaker than him, which was why she wasn't very respectful toward Zhang Yan before. However, she didn't know that even though they were at the same cultivation, the difference between their cultivation and that of the disciples of the big forces was like the difference between heaven and earth. Seeing that she was still in shock, Mu Hongqian couldn't help but shake his head. He came in front of Zhang Yan and bowed. I thank you for your help on behalf of junior sister Qi. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, you don't have to be so polite. It's nothing. He took 2 steps forward and looked at the armor under his feet. This demon is wearing armor. It's definitely not something that can be produced in the Netherworld River. Mu Hongqian also moved to his side, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. He said, my master once said that this demonic treasure had been floating in the Netherworld River for many years. As a result, the restrictions on it collapsed, and the door was opened, causing the secret manual to leak out. That's how our sect obtained it. This demon's armor is most likely obtained from the demonic treasure as well. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered, and he said, that makes sense, but I'm afraid there's more than one demon. I'll lead the way for you, brother Mu, please be careful. Mu Hongqian knew that this wasn't the time for pleasantries, and he quickly said, I'll have to trouble you then, brother Zhang. Seeing that Zhang Yan did not seem to care about the armor and the divine armament at all, she hesitated for a moment before extending her hand and keeping the 2 items. Zhang Yan saw that Mo Tiange was holding the heart-protecting lantern earlier, so she was a little slower in dealing with the enemy. He muttered to himself for a moment, then waved his sleeve and 3 talismans flew out. He said, fellow Taoists, if you're careless and get out of the lantern's illumination, these talismans can protect you for a moment. Mu Hongqian raised his hand and took it. When the talisman was in his hand, he felt as if he was holding a warm stove. The coldness in his body disappeared and he was shocked. He thought to himself, this fellow Taoist Zhang actually knows the talisman technique. I heard that if this technique is passed down, it can also lead to the great Tao. She couldn't help but feel envious. Even though the Agarwood sect also had 7 or 8 kinds of techniques, only her Agarwood mysterious technique could be practiced to transforming Dan realm. Compared to the mysterious techniques of the big sects, it naturally paled in comparison. The Ganoderma horse had already scouted the path ahead. Zhang Yan set up the sword light and rushed toward the entrance of the 6th floor. Mu Hongqian hurriedly caught up with him and moved away from him. He raised the heart protection lamp in his hand high up, and a gentle light shone down, illuminating the path ahead. They didn't encounter any obstacles along the way. However, she was very nervous and didn't dare to relax. No one knew how deep this underground ravine was. After flying for a day, Mu Hongqian was still fine, but Qi Yelan and Hu Ju behind her were exhausted. Their mystic lights were dim, and it was obvious that they had no energy to continue. At this moment, Zhang Yan shouted calmly, the dark qi of the 6th floor is in front of us. Be careful, everyone. When Mu Hongqian heard this, she quickly gathered herself and raised the heart protection lamp in her hand high up. However, even though she was prepared, she only flew for a few feet when she felt a pressure coming from all directions. The flame of the heart protection lamp suddenly swayed, as if it was going to be extinguished. The original range of light instantly shrunk. She quickly stood still and could not help but be shocked. Only then did she know how powerful the 6th level's grievous aura was. It was far from comparable to the spirit chi on the 6th level. Chi Yelan was at the back of the group. Without the protection of the heart protection lamp, she let out a cry of surprise. At this moment, the talisman on her body spontaneously combusted, forcing the nether chi away. With this gap, she hurriedly took a few steps forward and rushed back into the light. Only then did she calm down. When she calmed down, she saw that Zhang Yan had stopped in front of her and was looking back at her. She hurriedly bowed from a distance, but she didn't dare to look at him. She lowered her head and stammered, "Thanks to Senior Marshal Brother Zhang's talisman, otherwise." Zhang Yan glanced at her and smiled. "It's nothing. Junior Sister Qi, you don't have to be so courteous." Qi Yelan saw that the talisman was indeed used for protection and wanted to borrow another one. But when she saw that Zhang Yan was indifferent to her, she felt a sense of anger in her heart. She thought to herself, "You're just a disciple of a big sect and that's why you're able to learn such superior skills. Once you've learned the secret manuals of the Devil's Treasury, you won't be weaker than you." Mu Hongchen also had a lingering fear. She calmed herself down and activated her Xian Qi to open the light of the heart-protecting lantern again. She said worriedly, "I didn't expect the grievance evoking to be so powerful. It's only been a day and half of the lantern's oil has been used up. I wonder how much further we have to go." Zhang Yan calculated in his heart and smiled. "Our luck is not bad. The Devil's Treasury happens to be floating in this direction. If we go now, we'll be able to reach it in less than 2 hours." Mu Hongchen was overjoyed and said, "If that's the case, we shouldn't delay anymore." Zhang Yan nodded his head. With a wave of sword light, he broke through the layers of dark qi and flew away again. When Qi Yelan and Hu Ju heard this, they forced themselves to be alert and tried their best to catch up. After an hour, Zhang Yan saw a streak of white light flying towards him. He knew that it was the Ganoderma horse. He let it fall into the Ganoderma bud and kept it in his sleeve. At this moment, Mu Hongchen, who was beside him, let out a soft cry. Her voice was filled with unconcealable joy. A squarish, 10 zhang tall flying pavilion slowly floated in front of them. This pavilion was black in color, and there were many carvings of unknown beasts climbing the roof. Their appearances were ferocious, as if they were alive. Although it was unknown how many years they had been here, they still emitted a bloodthirsty aura. This pavilion had a total of 6 floors, with doors but no windows. As it floated in the air, it seemed incomparably lonely. Mu Hongchen could clearly see that the entrance of this flying pavilion was wide open. It was not guarded at all. She could even see the books and golden weapons on the wooden shelves. In the middle of the first floor, there was a black stone tablet with talisman characters on it. It was obvious that it was the core of this Devil's Treasury. As long as she controlled this tablet, the Devil's Treasury would fall into her hands. Seeing that the Devil Treasury was right in front of her, her heart stirred. She had been thinking about how to break the restriction, but she didn't expect it to be so easy. It was as if it was within her reach. In her excitement, she leapt towards the door, but before she reached the building, her expression changed. A silver light flashed, and a long spear pierced out from the door. A red light immediately rose from her mask to block in front of her. However, this attack was too powerful, and the brilliance of the light trembled, and the red light overflowed in all directions. Her figure also swayed, and she quickly retreated a few steps. She looked up in shock. A cultivator with a stiff expression walked out from the door. He was naked and his hair was disheveled. There was a faint silver light on his skin, but it was a little uncertain. He held a long spear with a ghost head in his hand and walked out step by step. But when he reached the edge of the flying pavilion, he stopped moving. Mu Hongchen retreated to the side of Zhang Yan and frowned under her veil. She said in a low voice, "Brother Zhang, this demon has already reached the realm of turning illusory into something real. It must be a devil. Could it be the sure guard left behind by the owner of the devil's treasury? Zhang Yan shook his head and said with a smile, not necessarily. Maybe this demon saw a suitable place for cultivation and decided to occupy it. Mu Hongchen was stunned. He thought about it carefully and nodded his head in agreement. Now that I've heard what you said, it's possible. You have a high cultivation, why don't you wait for us to hold the line? I'll bring my 2 junior sisters to test him. Zhang Yan smiled and said, sure. Mu Hongchen took a deep breath and finally muttered something. She raised her arm and raised the heart protection lamp into the air. In an instant, the lamp fire rose and the light expanded, illuminating everything within 30 feet. She shouted, "Junior sisters, follow me and attack this demon." After saying that, she was the first to rush forward. A red light rose from the top of her head and danced like fire. It spun in the air and swept towards the demon. A green light flashed across the demon's eyes, but he stood there without moving. He gathered a ball of black gas in his palm and waited for the red light to come close before he slapped it on the mystic light. Mu Hongchen only felt that the mystic light was about to dissipate. He tried his best to stabilize himself and tried to compete with the demon. However, he didn't expect that he couldn't withstand the force at all. His body swayed continuously and finally, he felt a tightness in his chest. He had no choice but to retreat. At this time, Qi Yelan also rushed up. Above her head was a mysterious light that looked like a flower. At this time, she saw an opening and was about to fall down. But the devil did not even look at it and swept horizontally. Suddenly, a whistling sound broke through the air, bringing with it a gust of wind. Qi Yelan rarely fought with others. She was calm and could still dodge it. However, when she saw the demon's ferocious momentum, she instantly panicked and didn't know what to do. In the end, she barely tilted her body. With a bang, the spear hit her shoulder. Even with the protection of the light, her shoulder was still shattered. She couldn't help but scream and fall out. Hu Ju stood in the distance. She took off the silver ring from her arm and threw it towards the demon. The demon swung the spear in his hand and the shadows of the spear moved. In the midst of a series of clanging sounds, the silver ring was pushed away. Finally, a silver light shot out from his hand and went straight towards her face. Hu Ju didn't expect the demon to have such a move. She couldn't help but exclaim. Zhang Yan stood not far away. When he saw this, a sword light flew out from his forehead and slashed towards the silver light. After a sound of metal clashing, the silver light fell to the ground. Qi Yelan fell to the ground and was enduring the pain to take out a healing elixir. Suddenly, something fell in front of her. She took a look and found that it was a dazzling silver plate. She knew that it was the celestial artifact that the demon had just thrown out. She couldn't help but think, senior sister took that armor and divine weapon. I don't have a suitable celestial artifact now. This thing looks like a low-grade spiritual artifact, but the demon didn't know what it was. Chapter 153. Qi Yi. She inserted her spirit into the armor, but with a low cry, the silver plate turned into a ray of light and entered her ancestral aperture. She was stunned, but instead of being shocked, she was happy. She thought that the treasure had automatically recognized her as its owner, and thought, this treasure should be mine. Mu Hongchen tried to attack several times, but she was forced back by the demon's ghost-headed spear. The demon stood in front of the devil vault, guarding the door tightly. Every time she retreated, he would retract his spear and not chase after her. Mu Hongchen couldn't help but feel anxious. Although the heart protection lamp shone brightly in the sky, it was the result of her activating the lamp oil in it. The longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for her. Originally, Zhang Yan had saved Qi Yelan once, and she didn't want to owe him any more favors. However, there was no other way. After thinking about it, she could only shout, "Fellow cultivator Zhang, can you lend us a hand?" Zhang Yan had been observing from the side for a long time. He realized that apart from the long spear in his hand and the ball of black gas, there was nothing particularly powerful about this demon. Whenever Mu Hongqin's mystic light attacked him, he would immediately block it and didn't dare to let it touch him. Zhang Yan had a rough idea of what was going on. He said loudly, "Since fellow Mu has asked, I'll help you." Just as he was about to make a move, he heard a loud bang above his head, as if thunder had struck down. A huge golden pillar flew out of nowhere, spinning in the air and emitting bursts of bright light. In an instant, the golden gas exploded, and the sword light tore through the sky. Zhang Yan frowned, and together with Jian Shao, they rushed out of the range of the light in the blink of an eye. Mu Hongqin was also shocked. Fortunately, she had the Agarwood shield to protect her. Even so, she was still pushed back by the sword light. Hu Ju was further away, and she had suffered a loss just now, so she did not dare to get close. She did not make it. Qi Yelan could not dodge in time. Just as she was shocked, she felt the token between her eyebrows heat up, and the light around her body seemed to not listen to her commands, and actually rushed out of the door. Only the devil standing in front of the door refused to dodge. He kept brandishing his spear in an attempt to parry, but how could he block the all-pervasive sword light? In the blink of an eye, he was torn to shreds by the waterfall of golden energy, and the door behind him was immediately opened. Right at this moment, a streak of red light shot toward the entrance of the Devil Treasury at an incomparably fast speed. Once inside, the light dissipated, revealing the figure of a woman. Mu Hongqin opened his eyes and exclaimed, "Uncle Master Ni." Ni Qianying stood there proudly and mocked, "Mu Hongqin, you didn't expect this, right? You and your disciple have schemed for so many years, but in the end, this devil treasury will still fall into my hands." She smiled complacently and stretched out her hand to press on the stone tablet. She couldn't wait to refine this restriction. However, a moment later, an indescribable shock and horror appeared on her face. She opened her mouth and was about to say something when the door closed with a bang. The devil treasury was pulled out of thin air and thrown into the distance. In the end, it landed on a ferry that floated over from who knew where. There was a middle-aged Taoist priest sitting on the ferry. When he saw the devil treasury flying over, he chuckled and reached out his hand. The object in the air became smaller and smaller, and finally fell into his sleeve. Mu Hongqin was shocked. Where did this Taoist priest come from? Qi Yelan and Hu Ju seemed to have realized that something was wrong. They quickly leaned towards her and looked at the Taoist priest with a face full of vigilance. When the Taoist priest came closer, they could see his face clearly. He had a pair of phoenix eyes, a square forehead, and a smile on his face. He had a beautiful beard in front of his chest. He was obviously handsome, but the three women present felt that he was extremely evil and not a good person. Seeing him coming over, Mu Hongqin scolded, "You Taoist priest, why do you want to snatch our things?" The Taoist priest laughed and said, "I have obtained this devil treasury for 32 years, even earlier than you and your disciple. Even if it's not mine, I can't say that it belongs to you." Mu Hongqin was stunned and couldn't help but be more cautious. She probed, "Do you know my master?" The Taoist priest smiled deeply and said, "Of course I know her. When I obtained this devil treasury, I originally wanted to use it as bait to lure a few people to be my disciples. I didn't expect that I would attract a big fish like your master, Red Flower Fairy. I felt that I couldn't bear it, and I also felt that she would ruin my plans. Therefore, I had to be ruthless." When Mu Hongqin heard the last part, she felt as if her ears were struck by thunder, causing her to lose her balance. She pointed at the Taoist priest and said with a trembling voice, You killed my master." The Taoist priest admitted frankly, "Yes, your master, Red Flower Fairy, was a core formation cultivator. If I had succeeded in condensing my core, I would have fought with her. However, her lifespan was almost up, and I hadn't completed my cultivation, so I couldn't bear to fight her with my life. Therefore, I used some tricks to taint her gold core, so that I could send her on her way earlier." Mu Hongqin shouted, and the red glow on her head rose several feet high. She pounced forward and said in a hoarse voice, "Evil Taoist priest, I will kill you today to avenge my master." The Taoist priest smiled and said, "I have a name, Lu Gu." He sat on the boat and watched Mu Hongchen rushing over, but he didn't have any intention of dodging or blocking. Just as Mu Hongchen was about to reach him and was about to make a move, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. He took a closer look and realized that it was Qi Yalan. He stopped in his tracks in shock and said angrily, "Junior sister Qi, what are you doing?" Qi Yalan's face was also filled with fear. She said, "Senior sister, I don't know, I didn't mean it." Lu Gu waved his horsetail whisk and said, "Disciple, come to me now." When Qi Yalan heard his call, her eyebrows heated up, and she flew towards him involuntarily. She stood behind him respectfully, but her face was filled with fear, and she didn't know what was going on. Mu Hongchen saw her expression and instantly understood that she had been tricked. She said angrily, "Evil Taoist priest, what did you do to my junior sister?" Lu Gu smiled and said, "I didn't do anything. It's just that your junior sister doesn't have the heart of a cultivator. She's too greedy and stubborn, which is a huge hindrance to her cultivation. However, I don't mind, and I'm willing to take her in as my disciple. I'll guide her for a few years and teach her the way of immortality." Mu Hongchen calmed down. She knew that this Taoist priest was powerful and she couldn't fight against him. Now that Ni Qianying and Qi Yalan had been captured, if she and Hu Ju were to die here, the Agarwood sect would be completely destroyed. Therefore, she took 2 steps back and said in a low voice, "Brother Zhang, junior sister Qi, let's go." Zhang Yan stood still and shook his head. "Brother Mu, since this person dares to tell you about killing his master, he must have a way to prevent us from escaping." Lu Gu looked at Zhang Yan and said with a smile, "Only this fellow Taoist understands. I've already laid down a dragon trapping array on the 6th floor. Without me opening it, even if you know how to break it, you won't be able to leave within half a month." Mu Hongchen's voice was as cold as ice. "Evil Taoist priest. What do you want?" Lu Gu squinted his eyes and said, "As long as you're willing to become my disciple and cultivate my skills willingly, I won't hurt you. If you're willing to let me put a restriction on you, I can let you go. My conditions are very generous, you better think about it carefully." Mu Hongchen sneered and said, "You want to be my master? Let's see if you're capable enough." She knew that she couldn't escape, so she didn't think about anything else and dashed forward again. Relying on the protection of the Agarwood shield, she condensed all the light around her body into a ray of rainbow light that swept towards Lu Gu. Lu Gu chuckled and waved his sleeves. A ray of green light burst out from behind him and exploded in the air. The red light that was descending disappeared instantly. Mu Hongchen was shocked. She quickly circulated the spiritual energy in her body and tried to force out another ray of light. However, it was too late. Lu Gu laughed, and a ray of green light shot out and landed on her head. She felt like a millstone that weighed a ton was pressing down on her body. Not only could she not move her legs, but she also had no choice but to kneel down slowly. Lu Gu smiled at her and said, "I'm not in a hurry to accept you. You can stay here and ponder for a while." Zhang Yan saw that this Taoist priest was able to suppress Mu Hongchen with just a ray of split light. He knew that this person was at least at the 3rd level of the mystic light realm, or even higher. After reaching the 2nd level of the mystic light realm, the mystic light would be able to change between hard and soft. After reaching the 3rd level of the mystic light realm, the mystic light would change again. At this level, there was a saying, condensed as one, not lost for 60 years. It meant that if a ray of mystic light was placed in a box, it wouldn't disappear even after 60 years. After it was taken out, it could still illuminate the surroundings and return to the user. When Du Bo died all those years ago, he'd separated a strand of profound light to carry Du Yu and Fei Xiao, and he'd attained such a state. However, when compared to the feeling of the Taoist before him of being able to do as he pleased, it was still inferior. Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and stopped Hu Ju, who was about to walk forward. He said in a deep voice, "Taoist Hu, I'll take care of this." Go take care of your senior sister. Hu Ju knew that she wasn't Lu Jiyi's match. She nodded and ran towards Mu Hongchen. Zhang Yan took a few steps forward and smiled. If this Taoist priest wants to be my master, you'll have to ask the sword in my hand first. Lu Gu smiled and said, I'm willing to spar with you, Taoist. Zhang Yan thought in his heart, and a sword ball leaped out from between his eyebrows. A spot of light that was as fast as fire suddenly slashed towards Lu Gu. The smile on Lu Jiyi's face didn't change. He sat there with his legs crossed and only used his horsetail whisk to defend. The sword ball in Zhang Yan's hand could move at will. They flew up and down around the opponent, but Lu Gu blocked left and right, looking very calm. He actually managed to receive all of the sword lights. After fighting for a while, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. The sword ball that was flying in the air suddenly split into two and spun downwards. Separation and reunion splitter. This was extremely sudden, and Lu Gu was also stunned. With a clang, he pulled out a red magic sword with his left hand and waved his horsetail whisk with his right hand, blocking the two sword balls. At this moment, he had a serious expression on his face. He was no longer careless and stood up. Under the attacks of the two sword lights, he wielded the two magic weapons tightly. After fighting for more than an hour, Zhang Yan let out a clear shout. This time, he separated 6 sword balls. 8 balls of light circled around Lu Gu up and down. There were spots of starlight and silver lines circling around him. Even so, Lu Jiyi's expression was calm, and he seemed to be at ease. He didn't fall into a disadvantageous position. However, the more he fought, the more surprised he was. Controlling the sword ball was very taxing on the mind, especially the method of separating the swords. But after fighting for so long, Lu Jiyi's breath was still strong and his mind was clear. He didn't show any signs of exhaustion, which greatly exceeded his expectations. After fighting for another 2 hours, Zhang Yan saw that his opponent was also full of vigor and didn't show any signs of weakness, so he didn't hold back anymore. With a long whistle, the 8 sword orbs trembled at the same time, and a sword shadow appeared from each of them. In an instant, a total of 16 sword balls flew in the air and spun like a storm. They scattered thousands of light spots and converged into one, sweeping down violently. Even with Lu Jiyi's composure, he couldn't help but change his expression. In his life, he had fought with no less than 10 sword cultivators. He deeply knew that if one didn't have a magic treasure to protect himself, he absolutely couldn't let them unleash this kind of sword momentum. Once this sword momentum was unleashed, it would be overwhelming, like a storm that couldn't be blocked. He also shouted loudly, and a blood-red color suddenly appeared on his face. From the dim and tiny golden core in his abdomen, he forced out a wave of core evil chi. He opened his mouth and spat it out. In an instant, it was as if a hurricane was blowing on the ground. The 16 sword balls were actually blown left and right, and they were actually forced dozens of feet away. After spitting out this breath, Lu Jiyi's face also turned pale, and his spirit became a little weary. He secretly sighed, I was careless, careless. He continued to gather and condense sword momentum again. His body swayed, and suddenly countless thin strands of mysterious light shot out from his body, rushing forward a step ahead. Chapter 154. After Lu Gu said this, the azure profound light swept through the layers of ghostly chi and whizzed over. This profound light didn't gather into a ball like usual. Instead, it was like tens of thousands of locusts flying together, covering the sky. This was clearly using the profound light to the point where it could be divided and combined at will. Putting aside the identity of the opponent, this move was still amazing. Zhang Yan had fought with many mystic light realm opponents, but in terms of the use of profound light, this Taoist who called himself Lu Gu was the most proficient. None of the direct disciples in the 6 rivers and 4 islands could compare. At this moment, his hands were empty, and he couldn't take back the sword sphere in time. If the sword sphere of a normal sword cultivator was forced away by the core fiendish chi and had to deal with the profound light in front of them, they would have to pay attention to one thing and lose the other. However, this sword sphere of his had already developed a true consciousness. With just a thought, it would be able to use it freely, so there was no need for him to pay attention to it. Therefore, he wasn't afraid of this profound light at all. He just pulled himself together, and a blazing light that looked like molten iron and copper appeared above his head. This golden-red profound light spread out, and in an instant, it spread out more than 300 feet. It didn't wait for the azure light to attack, and it rose up on its own. When it broke through the air, there were crackling sounds, and from time to time, there would be golden sparks. Everywhere it passed, the ghostly chi of the sixth layer melted like the scorching sun and snow, disappearing. When the two lights collided, the golden fiery light tore apart the azure curtain in the sky, and instantly, a huge gap appeared. What a domineering profound light! Seeing the momentum of the golden fiery profound light, Lu Gu was also shocked, but he wasn't too worried. The opponent had lost the opportunity in one move, and the sword sphere was pushed to the side. He had already taken back the initiative. As long as he didn't make any mistakes, it would be extremely difficult for the opponent to turn the tables. He laughed softly, and when he made a sign with his hand, the azure profound light in the sky gathered in the middle and pressed down again. This time, with his full force, the profound light instantly surged over like a tide. Zhang Yan did not show any signs of weakness. The Tai mystic light shone like a golden sun in the sky, intense and exciting. He had cultivated the primordial unity golden fire mystic light for so long, but he had yet to find someone who could fight him on the mystic light. Now that he had met his match, he opened his chest to the fullest, and his fighting spirit soared. No matter how the cyan mystic light rained down on him, he did not take even half a step back, and his monstrous fighting spirit surged forward. In just a moment, the two lights had collided and worn each other down no less than 100 times. When the situation on this side stabilized, Zhang Yan pulled out his hand. With a thought, he spun the sword pellet and attacked Lu Gu again. Lu Gu frowned slightly. He didn't expect Zhang Yan to be able to control the sword pellet when he was fighting with his mystic light. This time, he also felt that it was very troublesome and knew that he had to use other methods. He let out a low shout and waved his hand. 3 golden talismans leaped in front of him. In the blink of an eye, they transformed into a large monument that was 10 feet tall. This large monument revolved around Lu Gu and repeatedly collided with the sword pellet. However, the quality of this object was inferior to the sword pellet, and after a while, its spiritual light dimmed, showing signs of fading. Every time this happened, he would open his mouth and spit out a mouthful of spiritual energy, and the large monument would bounce back. Although the sword pellet continued to slash down, Zhang Yan was still competing with Lu Gu on the mystic light. He couldn't control the sword pellet as fully as before, and many exquisite and complicated sword techniques couldn't be used. Therefore, he couldn't break this layer of solid wall, and could only serve as a restraint. Although Lu Ji's usage of mystic light was far better than Zhang Yan's, he was still a lone cultivator, and the quality of his mystic light was slightly weaker. When the two clashed, he was at a disadvantage. Every time his mystic light was brushed by the red light, it would completely disappear. After the mystic light was worn away, it couldn't be regenerated out of thin air. He needed to circulate the spiritual energy in his chest again. He had failed to condense his golden core, and although he only had half of the spiritual energy left in his chest, the speed at which he converted mystic light into mystic light was much faster than normal mystic light realm cultivators. When one mystic light was worn away, another one would quickly replace it. It was as if it would never stop. Lu Gu laughed coldly in his heart. Although the mystic light battle seemed to be in a stalemate, he had cultivated for hundreds of years, and his foundation was extremely deep. Furthermore, he had already condensed a small golden core a long time ago. How could a cultivator at the first level of the mystic light realm compare to him? He believed that as time passed, he would be able to use his dense and deep mystic light to suppress this troublesome opponent. On the other side, Mu Hongchen and Hu Ju were dumbfounded. Although the battle between these two cultivators wasn't earth-shattering, it was still majestic. As the battle reached its climax, sparks flashed in front of their eyes, and green auras slashed at their faces. Lu Gu only used one mystic light to suppress her to the point that she couldn't move at all. When facing Zhang Yan, the thousands of green auras were like stones sinking into the ocean, and they disappeared without a trace. At this moment, she finally knew how far behind he was in terms of mystic techniques. Although the battle between Zhang Yan and Lu Gu was intense, his eyes were calm. He could roughly guess what his opponent was planning. However, he had enough elixirs on him, and he wasn't afraid of using them up. Every 2 hours, he would take out an elixir and consume it. The elixirs would circulate in his spirit sea once, and the elixirs would be dissolved. The 81 mouthfuls of spiritual energy in his chest would revolve continuously, and they would continuously produce golden and fiery mystic lights. It was absolutely impossible for him to exhaust all of his spiritual energy. Both of them were tenacious and extremely patient people. They fought back and forth, like wind and fire entangling each other for a long time. However, they were still the same as when they first fought. Neither of them showed any signs of exhaustion or retreat. However, after fighting for such a long time, Zhang Yan faintly felt that something was amiss. It was as if he had overlooked something. After thinking about it carefully, his eyes flashed, and he finally caught a hint of something. If Lu Gu didn't see him swallow the elixirs, it would be fine. However, he clearly saw it, but he was still so calm and unhurried. It was either that he had used all his means and was wholeheartedly trying to defeat him by grinding, or he had other plans in mind. Up to this point, Lu Ji's every move had landed on the key point. Like a brilliant chess player, he had also calculated all the backup moves, and there was not a single move that he had made in response. It was obvious that Lu Gu had fought with a sword cultivator like him more than once. He didn't believe that such an opponent had no way to deal with him. Most likely, Lu Gu was secretly planning something. He secretly observed carefully, and with this careful observation, he found that there was indeed something wrong. Although the cyan mystic light was omnipresent in every corner, it was usually rotating and flowing, and would not stay in one place for too long. This was to avoid too much damage from being swept by his golden and fiery mystic light. But now, there were a few places that were stiff and rigid, which was extremely abnormal. He frowned slightly, and with a flick of his finger, a drop of serene heavy water flew out. After flying for dozens of feet, it seemed to hit a thick wall and could no longer move forward. His heart couldn't help but shiver, and he drove the drop of heavy water to try in several directions. He found that the east, west, north, top, and bottom 4 directions had already been set up like iron walls, and only the south gap was left unblocked. If he guessed correctly, the south should be the passage deliberately left by the opponent. If he really went there, he was afraid that he would fall into the opponent's trap. He had several magic treasures on him, and it wasn't difficult to break out of this situation. However, what he considered was that even if he successfully escaped, he would still be in a passive situation. It was difficult to use this opportunity to reverse the situation in one fell swoop. If he wanted to do so, he would have to wait for Lu Gu to reveal a flaw himself. But with such an experienced opponent, it was almost impossible for him to make such a mistake. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered, and he glanced at Qi Yalan, who was standing behind Lu Gu, and then looked at Mu Hongchen. This Lu Gu should have captured these people for other purposes, and it was definitely not as simple as recruiting a disciple for himself. Therefore, he couldn't bear to harm their lives. Thinking of this, he had an idea. He raised his head and looked at the heart protection lamp above his head. Instantly, a plan came to his mind, and he smiled slightly, secretly waiting for an opportunity. Back then, Lu Gu had suffered greatly from a disciple of the Shaoqing sect. Fortunately, he was also a genius, and he managed to escape from this person's sword several times. But in the end, he couldn't escape from this person's sword, and his Dao foundation was broken. After that, no matter how hard he tried, he could only condense a small gold core in the end. Since then, he racked his brains to find a way to deal with sword cultivators. He understood that even if sword cultivators couldn't defeat their opponents, they could still fly away, and usually, there was no way to deal with them. But if he could find a magic treasure that could turn to capture his opponents, and then try to block their escape route, even if it was only for a moment, he might be able to defeat his opponents. Therefore, he spent 30 years painstakingly studying a true technique, and this technique was called the two phases oblivion technique. Once this technique was used, it could condense 6 dark light talismans. When fighting with sword cultivators, the talismans could freely switch between the real and the illusory, just like at the south gate at this moment. There was a mysterious light talisman blocking the way, but it was using an illusory form to deal with the enemy, so it was impossible to detect it. If Zhang Yan rushed out from here, he could instantly turn into a real form. As long as his figure was blocked, the other 5 talismans would surround him at the same time. Then, when the talismans fell, he would be captured. It was just that Lu Ge had never used this technique after he thought of it. In order to play it safe, he only hoped to wear down Zhang Yan's strength. The two of them fought for another hour, and Lu Ge suddenly heard a cry of surprise. He couldn't help but look over, and it turned out that the heart protection lamp had just been extinguished. Mu Hongchen was suppressed by the green light, and Hu Ju couldn't help her. It was already difficult for the two of them to block the dark light talisman, so how could they have the strength to resist the dark qi entering their bodies? Once this lamp was extinguished, they would die in less than a moment. Lu Ge first glanced at Zhang Yan, and he saw that he didn't seem to have noticed anything, and his expression didn't change at all. He didn't have any intention of helping them at all. Lu Ge couldn't help but chuckle inwardly, and he knew that Zhang Yan didn't care about the two girls at all. He thought to himself, it wasn't easy for I to trick a few people down here, and they are even dark light realm cultivators. They will be very useful in the future, so I can't lose them here. He was the main attacker, so he could naturally advance and retreat freely. Thinking that he had completely locked down Zhang Yan, he relaxed and released 2 rays of dark light talisman to protect the two of them. However, the moment he made his move, Zhang Yan moved. He let out a long roar, and 16 sword orbs slashed down. Instantly, the 3 large steels in front of Lu Ge swayed left and right, as if they were going to shatter at any time. Lu Ge was shocked. If he was hit by these sword orbs, he would definitely be dismembered. In a panic, he continuously spat out spirit energy, trying to stabilize himself. At the same time, the dark light above Zhang Yan's head expanded, and he forcefully tore open a path in the green light in front of him. He took out a cloud pattern vermilion brush and brushed it at the dark light talisman in front of him. The talisman immediately became dim and floated, as if it was going to disappear. He let out a loud shout, and with a leap, he turned into a golden fiery rainbow and rushed forward, smashing the talisman in an instant. At the same time, he changed his mind, and the 16 sword orbs were all taken back into his body. His body turned into a sword ray that could penetrate the heaven and earth, and he brazenly slashed at Lu Ge. This series of actions was like a flash of lightning, extremely fast. Moreover, Lu Ge completely did not expect that the opponent would dare to break through from the middle. In an instant, Zhang Yan flew and slashed in front of him. Seeing that one of the large steels in front of him was penetrated without any obstruction, his expression changed greatly. At this moment of life and death, he could no longer care about the demeanor of an expert. He raised his hand and threw out an item, shouting, "Move." This item was shaped like a flying disc, and it collided with the shocking sword ray that was slashing at the sky. The air rumbled like thunder, and the item disappeared together with Zhang Yan. Lu Ge wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He had also made up his mind. Abandoning the artifact that he had yet to completely refine, he moved Zhang Yan to an array formation that he had already set up long ago. He let out a long breath, closed his eyes, and thought of a few methods. Feeling that he still could not subdue Zhang Yan, he sighed and said, "Fine, since I can't subdue you, I might as well refine you." Chapter 155. Swallowing Yin formation of 7 absolutes. Zhang Yan slashed down with his sword, but it only hit something that looked like a magic treasure. A loud explosion suddenly exploded in his ears, and the scenery in front of him suddenly changed. He had actually fallen into another world. He immediately realized that this should be some kind of void-shifting technique. That thing was slashed by his sword ray, but it was not damaged at all, it just tilted its body. At this time it shook again, it seemed like it was going to break through the air and escape. Zhang Yan shouted clearly, "Where do you think you're going?" This thing was the culprit that moved him here, how could he let it escape? With a thought, a jade tablet flew out from between his eyebrows, releasing a ray of light. In an instant this thing was fixed in the air. Zhang Yan went forward and grabbed it, holding it in front of his eyes. He saw that this thing was half black and half white, like a plate or a shuttle. There were 2 opposite eyes on the front and back, sharp at the front and blunt at the back, shaped like a fat fish. When he held it in his hand, it was still struggling. It seemed to be full of spirituality, but he could not feel a bit of true consciousness in it. This was the first time he saw such a strange talisman, but now was not the time to look into it. He casually put it into his sleeve, and started to observe the surrounding environment. It was dim here, not up to the sky, not down to the ground. Although there was still nether energy pervading, it could not enter his profound light. Judging from this, he understood that he should still be in the 6th layer of nether energy. He could not help but think, that talisman must also have some kind of restriction, or Lu Gu also could not use it freely. Otherwise, with this kind of method, he could directly move me to the lower 3 layers of nether energy. He looked around a few times, casually shot out 6 talisman, each flying up and down to explore the way. Not a moment later, his mind sensed something, other than there being a way out below. There was a way out. The other 5 talisman did not fly far before they lost contact. After trying a few more times, he was sure that he was trapped in a formation that was set up using the terrain. 5 sides are trapped and only one is left, Zhang Yan sneered. This was clearly another one of Lu Ji's tricks. If he really charged out from there, he would immediately fall into a trap. However, there was no movement from the formation. Most likely, this place was still quite a distance away from Lu Gu and he couldn't make it in time, so he hadn't activated it yet. If Lu Gu arrived and activated the formation, things wouldn't be so peaceful. Suddenly, Zhang Yan's expression changed. He noticed that the talisman who was flying downwards had lost contact with him. This was expected, but at the last moment. However, he could sense that under this gate of life, other than the nether energy of the lower 3 levels, there was actually a deep ravine that led straight to the nether river. He couldn't help but frown. Although he was teleported here, however, he was confident that with the protection of the mellow shield, no matter how powerful the nether chi in the lower 3 layers was, it would not be able to do anything to him. However, the water of the nether river was different. One had to know that this water was formed by the essence of the earth Yin. Once normal treasures came into contact with it, they would be easily contaminated. Then, it would slowly contaminate their own spiritual energy and eventually become an ordinary item. If normal cultivators were to come into contact with this water, they would either lose their cultivation or lose their life. Zhang Yan thought to himself, Lu Gu once said that Mu Hongqin's master, Red Flower Fairy, died because he used the water of the nether river to contaminate her golden core. Now that he purposely brought me here, there's a high chance that he wants to use this water to kill me. He stood in the air with his hands behind his back and concentrated on thinking of a way to escape. Not long after, he suddenly remembered that Mountain River Boy had served many cultivators and was very knowledgeable. Instead of thinking about it alone, he might as well ask him. Thus, he shouted, "Where is the boy?" As he shouted, a boy walked out and bowed respectfully, "Master, Zhang Ju is here." Zhang Yan pointed below and said, "There's water of the nether river below. Let me ask you, do you know of any way to deal with this water?" Zhang Ju thought for a while and said, "Master, I do know of a way. Master's Tai mystic light is very overbearing. If there isn't much water of the nether river, it can be refined. Once the water is worn down, it will return to its original source. Then, it will be contaminated by external qi and turn into 9 heavens nether qi. Then, it won't be hard to deal with. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, this method is too passive. However, this is the only way for now. I'll decide after I see the water of the Nether River. If there's really no other way, I might have to ask Senior North Sea's clone to break this situation. The clone of the Dark North Heavenly Sword could even fight against the Yuanian cultivators. Unless it was absolutely necessary and his life was on the line, he would definitely not use it. At this time, he heard Lu Jiyi's voice come from outside. Fellow Taoist, I've fought with you for half a day and I'm very impressed by your methods. I haven't asked for your name yet. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, I'm Zhang Yan. So it's fellow Taoist Zhang. I just said I was willing to take you as my disciple, but based on your abilities, it looks like I was boasting before. However, I can't let you go and reveal my secrets here. Today, I'll have to bury you here. Zhang Yan scoffed coldly and said, you and I both know this already. Why say such meaningless words? A loud laugh came from outside. I've been too talkative. Alright, then please try my fellow Taoists' devouring information of 7 absolutes. As the voice landed, Lu Gu, who was standing outside the formation, waved his horsetail whisk and the formation was activated. This 7 absolutes devouring information had a total of 7 seals, and only the bottom one was open. However, every 2 hours, this door could attract the nether chi of the nether river below the 7th layer, and continuously pour it into the formation. However, this was not the most powerful thing. If the ghostly chi could not harm the person trapped, the formation would automatically suck them away. Once the ghostly chi was removed, a cold wind would blow in the Styx River. When this wind came, the water of the Styx River would be swept up. Even if one had treasures to protect them, they would sooner or later be polluted by the Styx River and become mortal. When all their treasures were gone, they could not hold on any longer and could only die in the formation. At this moment, within the formation, rumbling sounds came from the ravine below, like a raging torrent, rolling and surging. The 7th level, Desolate Hatred Chi, was the first to be drawn by the formation and rose up. Apart from being able to invade one's body and destroy flesh and bones, this Desolate Hatred Chi could also arouse all kinds of dissatisfaction and hatred in the depths of one's heart, igniting obsessions and turning them into demons, causing them to burn to death. Seeing this chi surging up, Zhang Yan sneered. The profound light above his head fell down and separated the chi. As soon as this Desolate Hatred Chi appeared, it was actually scattered by the profound light of golden fire. Lu Gu, who was outside, did not expect this layer of chi to be able to do anything to Zhang Yan. He just blindly urged the formation and drew in the 8th level, soul-dispersing evil chi. This chi was invisible and did not affect the body. It only harmed the soul. Just a little bit of it would cause the mind of the person who was hit to be immediately confused. After a long time, they would turn into a true demon that only knew how to devour flesh and blood and devour chi. Zhang Yan knew that this chi was no longer something that the profound light could resist. He shouted loudly and raised his hand to summon the mellow barrier. This magic treasure flipped in the air and in an instant, rays of light scattered down and covered him. No matter how the soul-dispersing evil chi surrounded him, it did not move at all. Seeing this, the mountain river boy also shouted and summoned the mountain and river diagram. 100 zhang long diagram slowly unfolded in the air. He let go of his hands and feet to absorb the soul-dispersing evil chi. In less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the 7th level of chi that surged up from below was also swept away. As soon as this chi disappeared, the 9th level, Dark Spirit Death Chi, did not want to be outdone. Compared to the previous 8 types of chi, this chi was even more ferocious. With just a few glances from afar, it could attract one's soul. If one could not control it, one would fall into the river Styx and be trapped within, never to be reincarnated again. As long as the water of the river Styx did not come up, Mountain River Boy was naturally not afraid. However, he knew how powerful this dark spirit death chi was. Therefore, before the dark spirit death chi reached him, he took the initiative to suppress the mountain and river diagram and absorbed it with all his strength. Not a single strand of dark spirit death chi leaked out. Roughly an hour later, the 9th layer of dark spirit vanishing chi was also completely absorbed. Lu Gu shouted from outside, "Fellow Zhang, although I don't know what method you used, I also admire you for being able to remove the 3 levels of dark spirit death chi in one breath. However, when the Yin wind comes and the river Styx floods, even if you have a magic treasure to protect yourself, how long can you last?" Zhang Yan knew that the other party was trying to use words to shake his confidence. He smiled faintly and ignored it. At this moment, a mournful cry suddenly came from below, as if thousands of ghosts were crying together. The wind and clouds were gloomy. Mountain River Boy's face couldn't help but tighten and said, "Master, be careful. This is the Yin wind, I can no longer do anything." Zhang Yan nodded and looked down. He saw a dim yellow wave of air pouring in from the ravine. Once it entered the formation, it spun left and right, bringing with it endless mournful wails and screams. For a moment, even the light of the mellow shield of Zai He was shaking non-stop, as if it was about to be blown away. Zhang Yan knew that although the Yin wind seemed fierce, it actually couldn't do anything to him. He could only calm his mind and pay attention to see if there was any water of the river Styx being carried up. After a moment of careful observation, indeed, in the Yin wind, there were a few drops of black water flying around. The dim color made one feel short of breath and dizzy. He couldn't help but exclaim in his heart that it was powerful. Without hesitation, he immediately separated a Tai Xian light and hit the black water. However, when this Xian light went up, it only dissipated a little bit of the Styx water, and the Xian light suddenly disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan seemed to have expected this since the beginning. He took a deep breath and formed seals with his technique, and then he successively struck out over 100 strands of Grand Unity Profound Light to finally completely grind away this drop of water from the Nether River, and it transformed into the purest strand of Nether Chi that drifted in midair. However, this dark spirit Chi was formed from the Yin Chi of the earth, and it was best at polluting other spiritual Chi. Even Mountain River Child didn't dare to absorb it casually, fearing that once he absorbed it, it would pollute his own spiritual Chi. He could only wait for it to be mixed with other Chi and turn into one of the 9 types of dark spirit Chi. Just now, he dared to absorb it. Next, Zhang Yan did the same and dissipated the other drops of the river Styx. After doing this, even with his deep and long breath, he had to take out a medicinal pill and swallow it. He thought in his heart, just a few drops of the river Styx water is so powerful. If I wait for the Yin wind to carry a large amount of the river Styx water up, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist it. However, at this moment, his body suddenly trembled. The 3 drops of serene Yin heavy water that were originally in his Chi Si were trembling non-stop, as if they were about to move. He thought in his heart, just a few drops of the river Styx water is so powerful. If I wait for the Yin wind to carry a large amount of the river Styx water up, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist it. As soon as these 3 drops of serene Yin heavy water appeared, they were like fierce beasts. They spun in the air and actually fought for food with the few wisps of pure dark spirit Chi. They were completely absorbed into their bodies, and then fell back into his body. Chapter 156. The chilly wind lasted for an hour before slowly receding. Fortunately, no more water from the river Styx was drawn into this place, so Zhang Yan passed through without any mishap. At this time, there was no sound from Lu Gu outside. He must have left long ago. Only then did Zhang Yan have the time to focus his attention on the Sea of Qi. He carefully examined the sudden change in the serene Yin heavy water. With one look, his expression was slightly surprised. These 3 serene Yin water had already been reborn. Not only were they bright, but they also faintly emitted a warm luster like that of a jade pearl. He couldn't help but be shocked in his heart. According to the records in the Billowing Cloud's secret book, if this serene Yin heavy water was able to advance a step further, it would be able to transform into Netherism heavy water. Although this water hadn't transformed to this step, it had undergone another transformation, and compared to its original appearance, it was much better. However, Mountain River Boy's face was full of surprise. He said, "Master, I didn't expect that the serene heavy water you released just now could absorb nether chi. Since that's the case, I guess you don't need to fear the river Styx." He sighed regretfully. "It's a pity that there are only 3 drops. If there were a few hundred drops, I might be able to use this to refine the river Styx, break this formation, and escape." Hearing this, Zhang Yan laughed and said, "My serene heavy water was originally condensed from the serene chi in the depths of the earth vein. It comes from the same source as the river Styx, so it's not strange that it can absorb nether chi. However, you said that you can refine the river Styx with just 100 drops, but you're talking big." The boy raised his hands and waved them around. He hurriedly explained, "Master, don't be fooled by the name of the river Styx. Although this river Styx is called a river, in my opinion, it's far from the real river Styx. The 9 layers of nether chi it emits is thin and thin. At most, it's just a pond. There's neither a demon's cave nor a spirit eye here. This river Styx definitely didn't grow here naturally. I'm afraid that some powerful cultivator moved this place from who knows where." Hearing this, Zhang Yan's eyes lit up. He said, "You're saying that this river Styx was moved here from another place by a powerful cultivator? So there's not much?" "Most likely." The boy's little face was filled with seriousness, and he said with certainty, "Presumably, when that senior moved the river Styx to this place, there was definitely more than this. However, this river Styx has no source, and after so many years, there definitely won't be much left." Hearing this, Zhang Yan's mind was enlightened. He'd spent a lot of effort to condense this serene heavy water, but he couldn't go deep underground and didn't have enough serene chi, so he'd only condensed 3 drops until now. This was a rare opportunity. However, to refine the serene heavy water, he needed enough water from the Netherworld River. Although according to what the Mountain River Boy had said, the Nether River was actually just a pond, he also knew that when the cold wind blew, the Nether River was actually just a pond. If 100 drops of the nether water came at once, he might not be able to block it with his current cultivation, let alone condensing heavy water. Unless he could increase his mystic light realm cultivation first. If one reached the 2nd level of the primordial unity mystic light, the mystic light would naturally be able to change between hard and soft, changing its shape according to one's will. As long as a few rays of mystic light changed shape and wrapped around a drop of water from the river Styx, the speed would be several times faster than before. However, there was only serene chi here. How was he going to increase his cultivation? Thinking up to there, Zhang Yan shook his head and sighed. Although there is enough metal and fire chi in the mountain river picture, the spirit chi here is very complicated and can't be used for cultivation. Otherwise, I would want to break through to the 2nd level of the mystic light realm here first and then refine this serene heavy water. However, Mountain River Boy shouted, "Old Master, don't worry. I have spirit chi here." Could it be that Master has forgotten that when you were challenging the 4-phase God execution formation, Master had used the Tai mystic light to grind away the murderous aura in the formation? This lowly one helped Master absorb a lot of spiritual energy, which was formed from the vitality of the 4 mighty enlightened masters. It is extremely pure and can be used to replace ordinary spiritual energy. After being reminded by the Mountain River Boy, Zhang Yan suddenly remembered. That's right, this Yuan Qi was formed from Master Dongtian's own power, but it was stolen by the Mountain River Boy. Not only could it replace spirit Qi, but it was also too wasteful. However, since he wanted to increase the Tai Golden Fire Mystic Light realm to the 2nd level, what was this bit of spirit Qi? As long as his cultivation increased, even if all the spirit Qi was gone, he could get it back in the future. Zhang Yan shook his sleeves and said with emotion, "Good, if I don't take the heaven's gift, I will be punished. Now that the opportunity is rare, I want to see whether I will refine this Styx first, or the Styx will refine me first." However, if he wanted to cultivate, he must be fully focused, so he naturally couldn't fiddle with the containing and mellow chi shield at the same time. In this way, he would inevitably be invaded by the surrounding spirit qi. However, he had another way. He raised his hand and released the flying car that he got from Qin Qizhong of the Yuanyang sect. He stepped into the car and looked up. He found that it was very spacious, at least 5 people could live in it. There was a thick carpet under his feet, and a cloud couch opposite him. On the table in front of him, there were jade bowls and jade plates, lacquered teacups, silver pots, and golden spoons. On one side of the wall, there were exquisite calligraphy and paintings, and in the corner, there was a copper incense burner. He knew that the incense burner most likely contained calming incense, so he took 2 steps forward, lit it, and placed it on the table. When the fragrance gradually dissipated, he was surprised to find that it was actually a top-grade orchid tongue incense, which was not easy to obtain. He knew that he had seen it once in the water country of the Dang region. After walking around the car, he found in a secret compartment the seal of the flying car. He also knew that if he relied on the seal of the flying car to resist the 9 layers of spirit qi, even with the help of Mountain River Boy, in less than a month and a half, it would completely become an ordinary thing. However, what he wanted now was cultivation, so he didn't care about these external things. If he could use the spirit shell to resist the spirit qi, he wouldn't hesitate even if he had to use everything he had. He smiled and said, "Boy, hurry up and bring me the mountain river diagram." The boy was also in high spirits as he entered the carriage. Then, he let out a clear shout and fully unfolded the mountain and river cloud diagram. With a push of his strength, he shook out the spiritual qi that had been absorbed. The golden fire baleful qi that had been absorbed didn't wait for him to summon it. Now that he was trapped here, it actually ignited Zhang Yan's fighting spirit. He didn't want to waste any time, so he sat on the cloud couch and did his best to refine the spirit qi and devour the spirit qi. Once a cultivator stepped into the mystic light realm, the path before reaching the core transformation realm was smooth. However, there was one thing that was not perfect, and that was the accumulation of spirit qi bit by bit until it reached perfection. The effort needed was extremely long, but since he had made up his mind, he threw away all distracting thoughts and focused on increasing his cultivation. 7 days later, Lu Jiyi's voice came from outside again. He said, "Fellow Zhang, how have you been these days?" He knew that with Zhang Yan's cultivation, he wouldn't be able to get rid of him with just one gust of cold wind. However, he had already trapped Zhang Yan here, so he naturally had to wait patiently. If the first time wasn't enough, then the second time wasn't enough. He was confident that even if Zhang Yan had other methods, he would still slowly die here in the end. Zhang Yan smiled gently and said, "I have wine and food here, so I don't think it's any worse than brothers." Lu Gu thought that he was being stubborn, so he only laughed and didn't say anything else. He activated the formation again. After these 7 days, the nether energy in the ravine below was once again filled to the brim. After the 7 absolute devouring formation was activated, it rumbled like a war drum. The first wave of nether energy that was drawn up was still the 7th layer of nether energy, the desolate hatred qi. Zhang Yan had dealt with it once 7 days ago and easily dealt with it. Now, it was even easier. With a sweep of the profound light, it was completely destroyed. The soul-dispersing evil qi and spirit-vanishing qi that followed weren't anything new, so he dealt with them one by one. As expected, the cold wind blew again as soon as the 3 spirit qi were dealt with. However, this time, it was even more violent, and the amount of water from the Nether River was several times more than the previous 7 days. The water from the Nether River swayed left and right in the cold wind and splashed in all directions. With a glance, there were probably more than 100 drops of water. Zhang Yan's expression was also solemn. Even though the water seemed to be harmless as it floated in the air, as long as a drop touched his body, not only would it be able to penetrate his body like tofu, it would also be able to taint his profound seed. From then on, his foundation would be destroyed, and his lifespan would be reduced by several tens of years. Thus, he used all his energy and didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. He rode on the light and dodged left and right, and he didn't covet how much water he could refine from the nether river. He continuously emitted golden fire profound light, and only wiped away the water droplets that flew close to him. After more than 2 hours, the deep ravine was once again filled with nether chi. At this time, the cold wind gradually subsided. The water of the nether river was extremely turbid, and without the support of the cold wind, it immediately sank straight down. Other than the years that were refined by the Tai profound light, there seemed to be several tens of drops left. At this time, Zhang Yan finally caught his breath. Seeing this, he leaped forward and caught up to the water of the nether river. He shook his shoulder and fiercely emitted hundreds of golden fire profound light, and in the blink of an eye, he grinded out a few more strands of pure nether chi. Only then did he stop. He didn't return to the flying car, but sat on the spot, and extracted 1/3 of the essence from each of the 3 drops of serene heavy water in his body, and then operated it according to the method of the Lan Yun secret book. His original intention was to let the serene heavy water have extra energy to swallow the nether chi. Unexpectedly, when he moved, he suddenly felt a shock in his chest. When he looked inside the chi again, he was surprised to find that there was actually another drop of serene heavy water there. Seeing this situation, Zhang Yan couldn't help but feel happy. However, the 3 drops of serene heavy water originally had a faint brilliance, and now that a part of its essence had been extracted, it suddenly dimmed, and no longer looked like before. He saw that the nether chi in the air seemed to have signs of being mixed with impurities. He knew that he couldn't hesitate any longer, and without hesitation, he released them together with the drop of serene heavy water, and shot them all into the air. Sure enough, the 4 drops of serene heavy water seemed to have felt the remaining pure nether chi in the air at this moment, and immediately flew like the moon, greedily absorbing the pure nether chi. Chapter 157. The 4 drops of heavy water floated in the air and instantly stole all the nether energy around them, leaving nothing behind. After returning to his aura sea, Zhang Yan took a closer look and discovered that not only were the 3 droplets of heavy water restored to their original appearance, even the newly formed droplet of heavy water was like a profound pearl, sparkling and translucent on the inside and outside, faintly emitting the glow of a treasure. Obtaining another drop of serene heavy water was a pleasant surprise. Zhang Yan sighed. In the past, when he formed heavy water, the serene energy would come out from the veins of the earth, and when it reached the ground, it would pass through many obstacles and become much thinner. Thus, he could directly refine it into his stomach. However, compared to true nether energy, it was still much weaker. He could also see that pure nether energy was a great supplement for heavy water. If there was enough of this energy, refining 1 drop of heavy water would be a piece of cake. He thought deeply for a while. Right now, it was not good for each drop of heavy water to be too full. He had to maintain a deficit. That way, not only would he be able to swallow the nether energy that was refined, the nether energy could also be used to form heavy water. Thinking up to there, he immediately formed a spell and took out a wisp of essence energy from each of the 4 drops of heavy water. He gathered them together and circulated them in his chest. Soon, as he expected, another drop of heavy water was formed. Right now, there were 5 drops of heavy water floating in the sea of aura. However, with his current mystic light realm cultivation, this was the most he could do. No matter how much water he obtained from the Styx River, the amount of nether energy he could refine would only be about enough to form 1 drop of heavy water. The water of the Styx River came once every 7 days. According to this standard, he would only be able to form 4 more drops in a month. This speed was far from enough to refine the Styx River, which he had originally thought would be in the hundreds. With this thought in mind, Zhang Yan understood even more. Only by cultivating the Tai mystic light realm to the 2nd level as soon as possible could this problem be completely solved. Therefore, he didn't dare to waste any time and returned to the flying carriage. He used this chance to cultivate again. Time quickly passed. 1.5 months later, the restrictions on the flying carriage had been corroded by the nether energy and completely decayed. Zhang Yan threw it away without any hesitation. He then took out a flying boat from his sleeve. Back then, he had obtained a total of 9 flying boats from Wang Pan. Later on, one of them was destroyed. Now, he still had 8 flying boats with him. He also moved the things that were originally in the flying carriage up. After opening the restriction, he didn't care about how fierce the nether chi was and only focused on cultivating. During this period of time, Lu Gu would come here every 7 days to activate the formation. Although he would use sarcastic words to probe, Zhang Yan just ignored him, allowing him to curse outside. Aside from getting up to hide when the water of the Netherworld River surged up, he spent the rest of his time in the flying boat, refining his chi and devouring spiritual energy. He hoped to break through the realm as soon as possible. Although he had been cultivating day and night, and he had been absorbing the magic power and vitality from the 4 Taoist grotto heavens, his progress was very slow. Even so, he was not anxious or impatient. He did not advance rashly and still followed the prescribed order. Unknowingly, his cultivation was improving bit by bit. After he threw away the 6th flying boat, one day, he, who was sitting still, suddenly opened his eyes. There was a flash of gold and red in his deep eyes. Suddenly, he felt a breath pushing up from his chest. He couldn't help but open his mouth and spit out a grayish turbid breath. After this breath rushed out 9 feet, it turned into a wisp of smoke and gradually dissipated. Once this breath was gone, Zhang Yan only felt as if his body was stretched open and the heavenly gate was opened. Spiritual energy poured in and washed his entire body. There was no place that was blocked from his organs, tendons, and bones. There was no place that was blocked from his pores. Just as he was feeling carefree, he suddenly felt his heart become hot and then cold. There was the sound of rushing tide next to his ears. His throat swelled up and a bit of essence energy fell down. His body couldn't help but tremble. With a boom, the mystic fire golden luster overflowed from all the acupoints in his body, turning into fierce true flames and a vast golden wind. At this moment, a dazzling floating light that was over 60 meters wide had risen above his head, and the edge of it was actually flowing down like muddy water. When it landed beneath his feet, it seemed to have collided with an invisible barrier, instantly causing ripples and ripples of light, causing sparks to scatter wantonly, and specks of golden water to splash out. At a glance, it seemed as if golden lamps had been lit up in this space, illuminating this ravine so brightly that it was as bright as day. Zhang Yan stood up and felt the gloominess in his chest being swept away. He couldn't help but let out a long roar towards the sky. After 8 months, Zhang Yan finally stepped into the 2nd level of the mystic light realm, bright night like day. At this step, not only did the profound light accumulated in his chest increase by 1-fold, but it also complemented each other. He could control it at will. At the same time, Lu Gu, who was sitting on a ferry, also heard the commotion here. He couldn't help but be shocked. His expression turned gloomy, his eyes flashed, and he stroked his beard silently. A few months ago, he was still quite confident in dealing with Zhang Yan. Now that more than half a year had passed, although Zhang Yan was still trapped in the formation, he wasn't dead. He felt uneasy in his heart. He kept feeling that Zhang Yan would break out of the formation and ruin his plans. He thought in his heart, the power of the technique I want to cultivate is great. Could it really be that it will attract a tribulation? The more he thought about it, the more annoyed he felt. In the end, he stood up and said with hatred, "I don't believe it." He got up and flew to the side of the formation. He shouted into the formation, "Zhang Yan, what are you shouting for? You're already a bird in a cage. Do you think you can get out?" His patience had been used up in the past 9 months, so it was inevitable that his tone was a little fierce. However, it also showed that he was panicking and trying to be tough on the inside. Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. He didn't need to argue with the other party anymore. After breaking through to the 2nd level of the mystic light realm, the tables had turned. All he needed to do now was refine the water of the Styx River, and he would be able to kill his way out of the formation and fight with Lu Gu again. If he didn't speak, Lu Gu wouldn't be able to see through him. He felt that he was even more unfathomable. He stomped his foot and said, "Let's see how long you can last." With that, he waved his horsetail whisk and activated the formation again. Hearing the rumbling sounds below, Zhang Yan sneered. With a shake of the profound light, the golden light and raging fire fell like rain, mercilessly washing away the nether chi that had just emerged. With another shout, he summoned the mountain and river boy. The mountain and river diagram and the profound light worked together, and in less than a moment, the 3 layers of nether chi were completely wiped out by him. The 3 layers of nether chi disappeared. The next moment, a sinister gust of wind arrived. When Zhang Yan saw dozens of drops of the Netherworld River's water, he could only retreat if it was in the past, but now that he saw it, he laughed and said, "You came at the right time." He split up the profound light and arranged it layer by layer. When the Netherworld River came close, he immediately rushed up and wrapped it up. Before this ray of light could be completely worn away, the mysterious light behind it would replace it. This continued until the ball of water from the Netherworld River was completely refined. The usage of this profound light technique was both hard and soft. Not a single trace of it would be wasted. Compared to the previous fierce and tough collision, it was much more brilliant. After refining the dozens of drops of Netherworld River water, Zhang Yan released the 40 drops of heavy water that he had refined over the past few days, allowing them to absorb the nether chi back into his sea of chi. Then, he extracted the essence chi. After circulating his energy and circulating it a few times, 32 more drops of serene Yin heavy water appeared in his chest. After doing all this, the Yin wind also retreated. However, Zhang Yan seemed to be unsatisfied. He was already not satisfied with waiting here. He stepped on the mysterious light and came to the front of the ravine. He looked down and sneered, "You trapped me for 9 months. Today, I'm going to follow the waves to seek the source and cut off the roots. Zhang Ju, come with me." Mountain River Child quickly said, "Yes, Master." Zhang Yan shouted and released the chi of Zaihe shield to protect his body. Then, the mysterious light fell and pulled away the nether chi. He leaped into the ravine. This action of his drove the spiritual vigor around him. Instantly, the flames of his chi rose and rolled up the dazzling rays of golden fire. He rushed down aggressively. After walking for 2 hours, he finally reached the bottom of the ravine. When he looked up, he saw that the black water was like a spider web in the cracks of the stone walls. It was dark and unpredictable. His eyes flickered, and his shoulders shook, sending a ray of profound light toward the Ming water. However, after this profound light flashed, it disappeared without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea. He thought to himself, as expected. This stone wall that contained the nether water was a piece of earth-Yin stone. It should be the work of the senior cultivator who moved the nether water here. Both of them actually came from the same source. They were interconnected, so they could exist for a long time. When the water and stone gathered together, naturally, a mysterious light would not be able to do anything to them. However, this was not a problem for Zhang Yan. After fighting with Lu Gu for so many days, he had long understood that there were countless apertures in the ravine. Once the nether chi here was swept away, the Yin wind would appear out of nowhere and scrape some of the nether water out from the Yin stone. If that was the case, he only needed to repeat the same trick. The difference was that in the past, the Yin wind was activated by the formation. Now, he had to initiate it. He said, "Zhang Ju, absorb all the nether chi here with me. If I don't ask you to stop, don't stop." Mountain River Child quickly bowed and said, "Yes, Master." As soon as he finished, he released the Mountain River picture and started to absorb the nether chi. In less than a moment, Zhang Yan heard a whistling sound in his ears. He knew that the Yin wind was coming. He did not look too much and only focused on the nether water on the Yin stone wall. Once he saw the water being swept away by the Yin wind, he would immediately activate the mysterious light to refine it. Then, he would release the heavy water in his chest and swallow the nether chi. After it fell back into his chi sea, he would absorb the chi of essence and circulate his power. In a flash, he would refine a drop of heavy water and release it to swallow the nether chi. This cycle repeated, and the serene heavy water became more and more. He refined the heavy water day and night. However, the more he refined the heavy water, the harder it was for the wind to blow the nether water out. After 3 months, he only felt that there was emptiness in front of him and the gloomy chi had completely disappeared. When he looked forward, all the nether water here had been completely refined by him. Not a single drop was left. He stood on the spot for a moment and suddenly raised his head. He saw that above the void, there were a total of 365 drops of serene heavy water floating in the sky. It was said in the secret book of Lan Yun that if there were 100 drops of this water, it would be able to repel an army of 1,000. Now, it seemed that it was indeed true. Just by thinking about it in his mind, it was like the heavy water of locusts covering the sky and covering the earth. Even if it was him, without the sword pill, he could only retreat. He clasped his hands behind his back and chanted, 9 chis fly to gather the serene water, hang the river upside down to show the power of heaven. As soon as he finished chanting, the 365 drops of serene heavy water instantly converged into a vast and violent flow and fiercely collided against the stone wall. This collision was like a sudden clap of thunder. The entire underground ravine gave off a loud sound. In the midst of the crumbling gravel, a sharp sword gleam tore apart the 9 chis, cut through the nether world and brazenly rushed out. Chapter 158. Zhang Yan merged with his sword and dashed upwards. 365 drops of heavy water danced around him, smashing rocks and breaking rocks along the way. He pierced through the clouds and fog, heading straight for the place where the chi was the densest. Lu Gu had been meditating on the ferry, but although he had been meditating for the past few months, his mind had always been restless. At this time, when he suddenly heard that huge rumble, his face couldn't help but tremble. He flew into the air and opened his eyes to look ahead. He saw that in the distance, there was only a hazy light flickering, and after a moment, a brilliant sword chi suddenly shone through the netherworld, traversing thousands of feet of sky, and arrived. Even though he had already expected it, but seeing it in person, Lu Gu couldn't help but be shocked and angry, thinking, not good. This junior really broke free. Seeing that the sword chi flying over was really imposing, and seemed to be even sharper than before, his eyelids trembled, knowing that he couldn't take it head-on. But he also understood, when fighting with a sword cultivator, once he was afraid and retreated, the opponent's sword force would be like a storm, leaving no time to breathe. Under that continuous attack, even if he could hold on for a while, he would be defeated sooner or later, so he definitely couldn't let him take the initiative. He had a lot of experience in fighting, and with a turn of his mind, he thought of a way to deal with it. Raising his hand and grabbing, he took out a yellow mudstone from his sleeve, and threw it forward. The mudstone flew into the air, and actually grew to a height of 100 feet in an instant, immediately sealing the front of the ravine tightly, airtight. Lu Gu knew that this move wouldn't be able to stop Zhang Yan for long, but he only hoped to delay him for a while, so that he could use his other methods. Resting the horsetail whisk on his elbow, he raised 2 fingers in front of his nose, and muttered something. Not long after, a banner spun as it flew out. With a point of his hand, the banner instantly grew to a height of 50 feet. He then grabbed the pole of the banner and shook it with all his might. Hundreds of eerie black gusts of wind came from all directions, making whistling sounds that reached the heavens. But he still felt that it was not enough. He took out a gourd from his sleeve, opened the cork and poured the contents inside. Countless tiny black and yellow grains of sand were blown about by the strong winds. In a blink of an eye, the entire earth trench was covered in dust. These sand and stones were painstakingly refined by him using elixir water. Before he obtained this calamity dust banner, he could only rely on his own spiritual energy to activate it. When facing an enemy, its use was extremely limited. However, now that he borrowed the power of the banner, he could display 100% of its power. Although his movements were extremely fast, he had just finished all of this when an explosion sounded not far away. The rock rumbled and exploded apart. At the same time, a wisp of sword light that could pierce through the clouds and split rocks charged out. Lu Gu roared as he waved the banner with all his might. The ferocious black wind received the order and immediately wrapped up the flying stones and sand in the sky and swept towards the sword ray. Seeing this, Zhang Yan coldly snorted and pointed his finger. A flowing gold flame flew out from his body and collided with the black wind sandstone. The flame within the light flashed. First, the black wind was forced away, and then the golden wind swept up, causing the sand and stones to involuntarily sink inwards, instantly losing their momentum. After spinning a few times within the sand and stones, the golden fiery light pushed outwards, repelling all of the sand and stones without missing a single grain. Lu Ji's expression became extremely ugly. He recognized that this was a technique that turned the mystic light from hard to soft and knew that things weren't going well. He had fought with Zhang Yan before, and his understanding of the latter's mystic light was that it was too hard and not soft enough. Therefore, he was extremely confident that once this technique was used, Zhang Yan wouldn't be able to block it with the Black Wind Divine Sand's ability to penetrate any hole. He would only be able to use his magic treasures or turn the sword ball around to protect himself. In this way, he would be able to contain the momentum of this earth-shattering attack. Then, he would be able to turn the tide and take the initiative in the battle. However, he didn't think that Zhang Yan's cultivation would improve so much and become a cultivator at the second level of the mystic light realm. Therefore, there was a flaw in his response. One wrong step led to many wrong steps. Lu Ji's plan died before he could even use it, and his body stiffened in the air. Seeing that he had suddenly made a mistake, how could Zhang Yan let go of this chance? His eyes flashed and his speed increased by 30%. In the blink of an eye, he was within 100 yards of Lu Gu. This sword light that was one with the sword slashed over with an unstoppable force. Lu Gu didn't know what to do. Facing Zhang Yan's unrestrained killing intent, although he was shocked, he didn't panic. He let out a roar and waved his hand, releasing a set of tokens. This set of command medallions was known as the Wind Boat Medallion. It was divided into gold, silver, and copper, with each color being divided into 3 pieces. Not only did each have their own uses, any piece that received a strike would be able to split and bear the damage according to the owner's will. Therefore, whether or not this magic treasure could be used properly depended on the wielder's skill. This item was something that Lu Gu had obtained from the demonic treasury. Due to a moment of carelessness, Zhang Yan had sliced off a piece of it. In the past year, he had spent a lot of effort to refine it back. After the tokens flew out, they shook in the air and turned into giant steels that were dozens of yards tall. However, Lu Gu was afraid that he wouldn't be able to block it, so he bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a few mouthfuls of essence blood. With the nourishment of his essence qi, these 9 talismans shone brightly and doubled in size. The surface of the talismans was even faintly glowing with colorful lights. At this moment, the seemingly invincible sword light had already arrived and slashed at the giant steels. A series of shattering sounds could be heard. After the sword light smashed 5 of the giant steels, it finally lost its momentum and was blocked. Zhang Yan saw that his momentum was blocked, but he wasn't anxious. He shook his shoulder and reappeared dozens of yards away. He formed a hand seal and separated the 16 sword balls to slash at Lu Ji's head. The sword being blocked was within his expectations. Lu Gu had many trump cards, so it was impossible for him to kill him so easily. Right now, the initiative was still in his hands. Once the sword force was unleashed, it would be continuous. As long as he attacked from afar, the opponent wouldn't be able to do anything to him if he wasn't a sword cultivator. He could only rely on his magic treasure to bitterly defend. If there was the slightest flaw, he would immediately be cut down by his sword. At this moment, Lu Gu only had 4 tokens left in his hands. However, he didn't use up all his tricks. He circulated his Xian Qi and released the 6 mysterious light tokens to resist the enemy. Fortunately, he was able to react in time and his technique was exquisite. Although he was forced to retreat step by step, he was still able to defend with all his strength. Although he retreated little by little, he didn't immediately show any signs of defeat. Although he was retreating little by little, his head was covered in cold sweat. He was thinking about how to escape. The reason why sword cultivators were so powerful was that their opponents couldn't chase them or escape. Once they were entangled, it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. However, Lu Gu knew that the power of the sword ball lay in its sharpness, speed. If one's cultivation was higher than that of a sword cultivator, he could use brute force to temporarily shake off the sword ball. Just like the last time they fought, he used his Dan Qi to blow away Zhang Yan's sword ball. Although this method seemed crude, it was the most useful. Now, he was prepared to use the same trick again. As long as he could find an opening, he could find time to release the devil treasury. At that time, he only needed to hide inside, and no matter how powerful Zhang Yan was, he wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Having thought of a countermeasure, he saw that the sword force was getting more and more urgent. Lu Gu gradually felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. Without hesitation, he leaped up high and took a deep breath. With a ha, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of green Dan Qi. This mouthful of Dan Qi instantly stirred up a hurricane. It was unstoppable, and in an instant, it blew the sword ball hundreds of feet away. Then, he made a hand sign, and the remaining 5 giant steels and 6 mysterious light talismans vibrated together, surrounding the sword ball. They locked all the exits together. Then, he shook off the mysterious light on his body, and green light floated around him. It gathered above his head, and actually formed a mountain-like giant tablet that crushed towards Zhang Yan. At the same time, he shook his hand and released the devil treasury from his sleeves. Not far away, it transformed into a 6-story tall building with its door wide open. As long as he could enter the devil treasury in time, no matter how many tricks Zhang Yan had, he wouldn't be able to break through this layer of restriction. Lu Jiyi's movements were both defensive and offensive. He did it like moving clouds and flowing water, grasping every opportunity accurately. There wasn't a single flaw to be found, and he could be said to be extremely shrewd. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he laughed coldly in his heart. How could he make the same mistake twice with just one move? Previously, he didn't use the heavy water because he was waiting for this moment. At this moment, he pointed his finger, and 365 drops of Yin heavy water swirled like a waterfall, and went up to meet the attack without fear. Just as Lu Gu lifted his foot and was about to step into the devil's vault, he heard a loud explosion. The green light surged wildly, and the huge token formed by the mysterious light did not even have the chance to resist for a moment, and was shattered on the spot. At this moment, Lu Gu was only a step away from the devil treasury, but a golden fiery light suddenly flew over, and forcibly blocked his path. Lu Jiyi's face was pale. Seeing the Yin heavy water and the mysterious light attacking from the front and back, he knew that he had miscalculated again, and the chance to hide in the devil treasury was lost. If he continued to be entangled here, he only needed to delay for a moment, and once Zhang Yan's sword ball broke through the talisman, he would no longer have a chance to escape. He gave a long sigh in his heart, and threw down the devil treasury, and turned to escape. In his heart, he could only hope that Zhang Yan would be attracted by the devil treasury, and not chase after him. Without anyone controlling the talismans, Zhang Yan controlled the sword ball, and in a few moments, it was completely destroyed. He then landed on his body, and with a loud shout, he turned into a long rainbow, and chased in the direction that Lu Gu escaped. He didn't even look at the devil treasury that was floating in the air. There was no one else here. As long as he killed Lu Gu, he wouldn't be afraid of the thing running away. Although Lu Gu was familiar with this underground path, and he was one step ahead, but the speed of Zhang Yan's sword escape was far faster than him, and it didn't take long for him to catch up. Feeling the monstrous killing intent behind him, Lu Gu was scared out of his wits, and from his sleeve, he threw a bell far away. This thing looked like a magic treasure, and he knew that using it to fight against Zhang Yan would be useless, so he only hoped that it would attract him to search for it. Who knew that Zhang Yan only took a glance at it, and didn't stop in the slightest. But Lu Gu didn't give up, and kept taking out pills, magic treasures, and other things from his body, only hoping to attract the attention of Zhang Yan. But no matter what he threw, Zhang Yan didn't pay attention to it, and only cared about chasing forward. After Lu Gu flew for another 10 miles, he didn't have any more defensive items on him, and even his horsetail whisk was thrown away. Chapter 159. Even though Lu Gu said that he had a big secret in his hands, but no matter how he shouted, Zhang Yan didn't say anything. This kind of silent coercion was more powerful than any kind of threat. The fear in Lu Ji's eyes grew stronger and stronger. Earlier, he had recklessly used the core evil qi, and was already exhausted. Now that he was escaping upwards, he took a small path that led to the surface. Although he had escaped to the 5th layer of the spirit qi, according to his calculations, he would only be able to escape to the 3rd layer of the spirit qi before Zhang Yan caught up to him. So he gritted his teeth and decided to throw out a bait. He shouted, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, do you know why I am hiding here?" Without waiting for Zhang Yan's reply, he continued, "I was previously harmed by a disciple of the Shaoqing sect. My foundation was injured, and I could only condense a small golden core. Even the moon leaf Xuanzhen grass couldn't save me. I originally thought that there was no hope for me to achieve Dao, but I heard a secret by chance. In this devil's treasury, there is another method to form a core." Seeing that Zhang Yan was still unmoved, he hurriedly said, "I know that fellow Taoist Zhang must have a great background and have a superior Xian Qi method. You will definitely be able to condense a Jindan in one go. But the method of condensing a Jindan in this demonic treasury is strength Dao, and the speed of cultivation is incomparably fast. If you can successfully cultivate it, there will be many benefits. Fellow Taoist should have cultivated Qi Dao. If you can use this method to assist you, when you condense a Jindan in the future, it might not be impossible for you to condense a 4th-grade Jindan." Zhang Yan's face was still cold and expressionless. But Lu Gu saw that he didn't increase his speed and was delighted. He hurriedly said, "But there are still many restrictions to cultivating this method. In order to cultivate this method, I have prepared for as long as 30 years. I just haven't cultivated it yet. I can give you all the things that I have prepared. I only ask that fellow Taoist let me live." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "According to what you said, if you help me, won't you have no hope of condensing a Jindan?" Lu Gu saw that Zhang Yan's tone seemed to have loosened, and inwardly let out a sigh of relief. He loudly said, "We can find another method to form the pill. However, I only have one life. I still have 100 years of lifespan, so it's not like I don't have a chance. Even if I don't succeed, I can still live on in this world. It's better than dying right now." Zhang Yan couldn't help but ponder. Seeing his expression, Lu Gu added fuel to the fire, "If fellow Taoist doesn't want to, it's just a life and death struggle. Fellow Taoist shouldn't think of interrogating my soul after killing me. This place is filled with nether energy. If I die, my original spirit will immediately disperse. At that time, you won't get any benefits." One was chasing while the other was fleeing. At this moment, they had already reached the 2nd layer of the nether qi. Zhang Yan raised his head to take a look and said faintly, "After such a long time, fellow Taoist must have used up most of his strength. I can send you on your way." When Lu Gu heard this, he lost his composure. He didn't expect Zhang Yan to remain unmoved, and in the end, he still wanted to take his life. He spat out, "Fine. If you force me like this, I won't let you get what you want." He immediately flew towards a rock and turned around, glaring angrily at Zhang Yan. Then, he turned his hand and slapped his forehead. Instantly, blood spurted out, and he fell to the ground dead. Just a moment later, an original spirit floated up, but it was trapped by the surrounding nether energy. Before it could completely appear, it dissipated. Zhang Yan shook his head and sighed, "We're all cultivators. I can't bear to see your corpse exposed here, so I'll help you bury it." He reached out and grabbed the air. He picked up the corpse. At this moment, his eyes flashed and a sword ray flew out, cutting off the corpse's head. Then, he laughed, "How can you trick me with such a small trick?" In just a moment, another original spirit floated out from the corpse. It was Lu Jiyi's appearance, but at this moment, his face was twisted and he shouted crazily, "I thought that this plan was flawless. How did you know that I was faking my death?" Zhang Yan smiled, "You didn't die anywhere else, but you just had to die on the second layer of nether chi. Before you died, you even had to find a place to stand. It was obvious that you were afraid that your body would fall and be damaged. So, I tried slashing again." Lu Gu, on the other hand, calmed down and said in a hoarse voice, "I was just gambling on my luck. I thought that you should be from a prestigious sect and wouldn't harm my body. Who would have thought that I would run into someone as suspicious as you? I can only blame my bad luck." Zhang Yan smiled and shook his head, "You have more than one flaw." Lu Gu was not convinced and said angrily, "I'm already dead, don't you dare insult me. It's just my spirit dispersing, why would I be afraid of you?" Zhang Yan sneered and said, "Your original spirit dispersing is pretty good, but there's one thing that's not beautiful. That spirit is a little sluggish. It doesn't look like the main spirit, but more like a split spirit. Also, I happen to know that if one understands the devil sect's mental cultivation method and practices the spirit-splitting technique, one can gather the spirit-splitting spirit in another place. I boldly speculate that you threw down quite a number of magical instruments just now, and there might be a spirit-splitting spirit residing within them. Once I leave, the spirit-splitting spirit will be able to use that magical instrument to kill a few devils and swallow them. When the time comes, the spirit-splitting spirit will be able to gather on the main spirit-splitting spirit splitting 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 spirit. Even though Lu Gu was an elemental spirit, he was still dumbfounded when someone saw through his plan with just one sentence, unable to make a sound for a long while. Zhang Yan glanced at him again and said, "And you were very tenacious earlier, you would rather give up the demon treasury than give up the chance to live. Your cultivation is higher than mine, and now that you're forced into a dead end, I wouldn't be surprised if you chose to fight me to the death. But you actually killed yourself so easily, how can I not be suspicious?" Lu Gu saw that his plan was full of flaws in Zhang Yan's eyes and his confidence took a big hit. Even his original spirit body couldn't help but tremble. He looked up to the sky and sighed, forget it. Fellow Taoist Zhang's wisdom and cultivation are higher than mine. This is fate. Looks like this demon treasury isn't something I can occupy. I'm willing to tell you everything, but I only hope that fellow Taoist can send me out to reincarnate. What do you think?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I can't allow you to do that now. If you want to say it, then say it. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it." Lu Gu saw that Zhang Yan still wasn't willing to let him go, and he felt helpless. But he still wanted to delay as long as he could, so he said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, don't do anything. I'll teach you an incantation that can summon the demon treasury. Once you see it, you'll know that I'm not lying." Then, his mouth moved and he said the incantation. Zhang Yan thought for a while and then made a hand seal. In less than the time it takes for an incense to burn, the flying demon treasury flew out from below and floated in front of him. Lu Gu led the way inside. He was already in his primordial spirit form. Even if he could use the incantation, he could only use his spirit to control the instrument. Therefore, Zhang Yan wasn't afraid of him playing tricks, so he also walked in. In this demon treasury, there were old bookshelves on all four sides, and on top of them were bamboo books and jade slips. There were gold and bronze utensils, but there was a stone tablet with restriction. That day, Ni Qianying fell into a trap here and was locked in the demon treasury. Presumably, she was taken away by Lu Gu. Zhang Yan looked around again, but he didn't go up to the top of the pavilion. Instead, he asked, what did fellow Taoist Lu do to fellow Taoist Mu and the others? Lu Ji's face actually showed a hint of a sinister smile and said, I originally thought that fellow Taoist wouldn't ask. That Dai Hongqian refused to obey I's discipline. 7 or 8 months ago, I killed him. As for the other 3 girls, I let one go. He smiled weirdly, pointed to a bookshelf on the east side, and said, fellow Taoist, take down that jade slip and have a look. Then you'll know where they went. Zhang Yan looked at him and walked to the side of the bookshelf. He reached out his hand and took down the jade slip. After a while, he sighed and said, I see. Lu Gu stared at his face. Seeing that he was engrossed in reading, he suddenly shouted and pointed to the side, saying, look at the words on this stone tablet. Zhang Yan looked in the direction of his finger and found that it was the stone tablet with restriction. Previously, when he was standing in front of it, he didn't see anything except for a few talisman. But now that he was standing in front of it, there were a few words written on it, those who cultivate this Tao. Be careful, be careful, be careful. These words were written with blood-red vermilion paint. At a glance, it seemed to be dripping with blood, extremely shocking. Zhang Yan looked at it a few times. But he just smiled, obviously not taking it to heart. Seeing this, Lu Gu said angrily, what are you laughing at? Zhang Yan shook his head and said with a smile, I was wondering why fellow Taoist Lu was so straightforward and told me everything he knew. So this is the reason. What do you know? Lu Gu said sternly, but there was a trace of panic in his voice. Zhang Yan sighed, fellow Taoist originally cultivated this Tao, but he was killed by me. However, he was killed by me. Because of this, I firmly believe that if I cultivated this Tao, I would definitely not have a good ending. Thus, I decided to tell you everything. But you were worried, so you specially asked me to look at this jade scroll. When I was immersed in it, you shouted and took off this warning stone tablet, so that I would be able to plant the devil in my heart. Is that right? Lu Gu was once again exposed by Zhang Yan. His originally ethereal body swayed as if he was about to float away. Obviously, he was extremely shocked and shouted, so what if I am? Now that you've seen this cultivation technique, how can you resist this Yuhua? I don't believe that you won't cultivate it. Zhang Yan thought about it seriously, then said with a smile, this cultivation method is of great help to me, and it is an ancient secret technique. Although it is a demonic cultivation method, it is evil but not dirty, I will cultivate it. Lu Gu was instantly relieved, he chuckled and said, then I can rest assured even if my soul is scattered. Sooner or later, you will have to face the heavenly tribulation and end up like me, haha. At this point, he looked up to the sky and laughed. Zhang Yan smiled faintly, but fellow Taoist, you are wrong about one thing. Lu Gu was stunned, what is it? Fellow Taoist, you are cunning and have many tricks up your sleeves, but ask yourself, if you knew that there will be a tribulation after cultivating this cultivation method, why would you carve a warning on this stone tablet? Lu Gu said casually, I thought I didn't know how to write it. After saying this, he was suddenly stunned. Zhang Yan pointed at the stone tablet and said, the so-called tribulation, how do you know that it will be a cultivator? Who knows, maybe that cultivator is the true tribulation of entering the world. He knew that the truth might not be as he said. Who knew what the ancient demonic cultivators were thinking? However, he was not afraid. He had cultivated until now, and his path was bumpy. Did he not encounter any danger? What tribulation? He did not care about it at all. But when Lu Gu heard this, he believed it. He suddenly felt that everything he had planned was a joke. For a moment, he only felt mad. In the midst of his crazy laughter, he did not care that he was in the form of a primordial spirit, shouting and rushing towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan shook his head and waved his sleeve. A mystic light sprinkled out, and the gold and fire rolled forward, sweeping away the demonic primordial spirit in the blink of an eye. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.